I think is a lot of people I've talked to, a lot of Tullahomeans don't want that type of build out in Tullahoma. And so that's just starting off at the beginning there.
I think the thought was that, and again, I'm not going to try to speak for the consultants at this point, but it's my understanding that they received a lot of citizen input that residents weren't pleased with the type of product and the type of housing that was being built in Tullahoma by the local builders. So they were wanting to attract perhaps additional outside builders to bring in new products, better housing, different styles, that kind of thing.
I agree that I think we should have better housing here, but we should be able to affect that through the zoning and how we laid it out. As you talked about,
okay.
PUDs could help dictate how that's done, which
Correct.
would force the builders to
Correct.
do better.
Correct.
Also, the market should drive. If that's a poor built house, it shouldn't sell very well, or it should be low. So the market should drive that.
Before you go on, I'm Jennifer Moody. I'm the city administrator. So I just want to introduce myself. And then I just wanted to add, I think of everything you said, the only part of the intent that I didn't hear from the consultants is trying to attract big developments. I don't feel like they've ever said that to us. I can see why you would infer that from them saying regional and national builders, and sometimes those type of builders do come in and build a large number of units all at one time. I don't think that that is our market. And just like when you look historically back at Tullahoma, we haven't had that type of subdivision development.
I agree.
And I don't think we will. But just as Mary said, I think and we definitely need to revise the language to better match our intent. That's really important. But I think what I heard them saying is, things like if you want to see more residential development in the downtown, somebody to come in and build townhomes right in your downtown, it's probably not going to be your existing builders.
No, they don't do that.
Yeah. So
right. I understand. I agree with that.
So if help us however you can get that worded probably in a more nuanced way.
Yeah. It is, like I say, it's not important. It's just a comment.
Well, it is important.
It's
I've heard that
important
comment
with the
from
flow
other
of the
people.
document. Yeah.
I've heard that comment from
Well,
other
certainly have something that encourage local builders and, instead of, it sounds like what you're saying is we're not going to do any local builders. We want to just go up.
Well, okay,
That's what
so
it sounds like.
let's revise that language then.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had a question on page 17 under utilities.
Please.
Before we do that, can anybody else comment about?
Yeah, sure. I don't mind interrupting. Go ahead. Yeah. Comment, please.
Bob Bates is my name. This document has several pages in it about resiliency, which is for focus for local things versus national things. Say supply chains. The more local you have your materials coming from a regional or a local area, the less chance you're going to be hurt in a local, in a national or interglobal supply chain snafu that we just went through. So the resiliency part that's mentioned in this book several times, which I'm going to get back to when I ask my questions, goes along with what you're saying, that we should try and do our best to promote local things versus national things. People that will keep the money locally instead of taking their money or profit away from the area.
Can I add one little comment? Sorry, I won't speak loud. In this particular section, it made comments that they wanted to go to Murfreesboro National to give contractors because they understood more about sidewalks. Now, I understand if you're building a subdivision of over 500 units, a local builder may not have the employees to do that, except they could do it at a much slower pace. So my question in that is, when it comes to the roads, the developers of the roads, are we going to allow local, like Prince and Sons and those kind of people to also try to negotiate a contract with you to do the upgrades on roads and things, or is that in with this section of it too? And I think we need to
So
look
I
at
guess,
our
I think
liability.
she's asking if we have local contractors do city projects.
Well, let me try to clarify what you're asking first. Are you asking, is that it, how the city goes about acquiring
Yes, our-
contractors to do our
Yes.
local road work?
Yeah, because the way this is worded, it kind of sounds like
Will you
everything is just going to go to
Tell
other
it, did you
people.
happen to write what page or?
It's in, I'm talking about the same area he's talking about on, I think it was page 3, the regional developers.
And what was your last name? I can't remember.
I'm sorry, I'm Cindy Watson.
Yeah, I know, I remember.
The section that he's talking about is specifically about housing.
About housing. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about drawing.
But, you know, and
That's what I
the
wanted to
city's,
clarify.
yeah, the
It's
city's
just about
road work and
housing.
things like that is really outside of this plan at all. But I'll just answer that to say
Okay.
we competitively bid annually. And I mean, usually it is firms within this region that have bid.
Okay.
And keep them under a one-year contract, then we rebid the next year for the full year.
Yeah, that just kind of, the way it was worded, I wasn't sure if it just meant
Yeah.
housing or did it mean
Sometimes
all
on,
development.
and that's for
Since it
our,
mentioned sidewalks. I
that's
just
for our
wasn't sure.
annual paving work and emergency projects that come up throughout the year, things like that. But then occasionally you'll see on maybe a grant-funded project or something like, we just completed sidewalks on East Grundy Street. That was bid separately and contractors get bid on that individually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to you, Mr. Sullivan.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I don't
It's
mind
okay.
being interrupted, that's fine.
No, that's fine.
This is all.
I'm just, I
casual.
gotta keep track of
Okay.
everything, obviously.
Question about
17.
17 on utilities. And
Yeah.
I thought it would be nice if we had some understanding of where our capacity is of the city now with the population that we have. At what point, you know, what population point would we get to that we're gonna have to make significant changes to our sewer, water, are we gonna have problems with power? I don't know if that has to go in here, but it would have been nice to see, you know, something that says, well, when we get past this point, we're gonna have to do this or that. So that, you know, we understand what's gonna happen as the city continues to grow, where are we gonna be? So just a comment, it'd be nice if we had some understanding of where we are percentage-wise of our capacity, so we could get an idea.
I can't really answer the utility question.
I didn't see that anywhere in the
It
document.
should be, it's under
Under
proposed
indices.
facilities. I'm gonna find that. Mr. Brooks, do you have something to say?
Well, if it's in here, I don't recall seeing that specific, you know,
It's under facilities.
it is.
It
should
doesn't
be.
state exactly like thresholds, though.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna add, my name's Winston Brooks, I work for the city, been 10 years, fully invested in Tullahoma, lived here, my wife is from here. Wake up every day trying to, you know, build this community better and this plan, and just trying to grow it. And we work every week with developers and very closely with Tullahoma Utilities Authority. We had a steering committee made up of the different utility agencies, and so Scott Young of TUA was on the steering committee and, you know, vetted the plan. And TUA does an amazing job. And they have incredible amounts of capacity for wastewater, clean water. We're not anywhere close to, you know, tapping out. And I'll give an example. I mean, a few, you know, years ago, there was a company, they needed to use, you know, a million gallons of water a day, you know, and could they handle that? Like, yeah, that's no problem. I mean, so they've got capacity. And so that's not a concern. There's no concern of us, you know, in the
So
next
if we-
15, 20 years.
if you went to the build out and we tripled from, you
No, the
know,
build out-
I said we weren't gonna go there, no, we
Yeah,
can't.
we're not
I said, if we
tripling
got
the
to,
density.
if we got to 60,000, would we be able to handle it with what we have now? Or
I don't
would
know
we
the answer.
have to
But
double the capacity? I'm just curious.
That's
I
just
don't-
far outside of the
scope of the plan. We're not-
This plan is about the next 5 to 20 years.
Okay.
Well, the bottom line to that is that the state is going to require a review of the utilities before they're extended.
Yeah, and another thing too is the city's not going to allow development to happen and overrun our infrastructure.
No, I know,
Spending
but
roads and things.
me as a looking out for the years, I'm trying to understand, what will happen.
Yeah.
We don't, it doesn't talk about, it talks about a little bit, well, you have to do this or that, but it doesn't say, once we get, to here, we're gonna have to add another school, or we're going to add 2 schools, or, because all that impacts where what happens to everybody else here, and everybody's interested, well, okay, if we do this growth, what's the impact gonna be to the residents of Tullahoma? So it's just information.
I agree.
And I'm not saying it has to be there, it's just information.
I think it might be helpful though, so in the section you're looking at existing conditions on the page 17, it's talking about what we have today existing. Then on page 74, when you get into the section on infrastructure and facilities, that's where they're making recommendations or matching it back up with our growth projections. What are they recommending to us that we need to do to prepare our infrastructure for growth? And just looking through it really quickly, each bullet point is a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
It does not say anything about expanding capacity or the need to do that. So I think you're making a good point. I want to make sure we go back to our partners at TUA and make sure that they are absolutely agreeing with what's on this page.
And that's what I was saying, when I read through it, I didn't see any more detail that I would have liked to have seen with what's going to happen.
Right, the absence of that recommendation makes it look like then our existing infrastructure must be sufficient for those 1,000 to 2,000 people that they're forecasting. But let's make sure that TUA agrees with that.
It's just more information.
Yeah, and it's, just to further that, thank you for providing that information. For 74 and 76, it talks about sewer capacity, water capacity, electricity, gas, telecommunications. And then on 76, under that same infrastructure facility, it talks about public schools. It does say, study the feasibility of a 5th elementary school in Tullahoma's northern area. It talks about emergency services, explore the feasibility of a 3rd fire station, cultural venues, and then other city facilities. So the plan does address the need as the city does grow, the infrastructure and the services provided will in turn have to grow. But I think I hear your input and that further clarification. And that area needs to be expanded upon.
Studies are going to be required, but when people are looking at this and want to accept, what I'm doing, what is the impact going to be? Well, okay, so, and I think it was commented at one of the meetings that, okay, a new school is, what was it, $300 million? Something like that. It's not in here, but it would have been, well, you can expect that if we have to add a school, this is going to be, that would have been nice information to have had in there for people to understand what the impact is going to be. Okay. On page 35, there's a whole section.
I'd like to try to stay with one person, at a time. Okay, go ahead.
On page 35, whole section on climate change. My only problem with this is it looks like we have this here, and it specifically talks about, well, I don't think it should be in this plan first off. We can make smart decisions about building in Tullahoma without having this here. I think people know that we should be doing things more efficiently to reduce heating costs, everything, to build up. But one thing that is in here that I think goes against what I feel like Tullahomeans want is it specifies mixed-use compact development to meet this need, being climate change, which is what most of us don't want, is this mixed-use Murfreesboro type clumps of little small areas and to get the that mobility thing. And so I sort of disagree, and people can disagree with me, that's fine. I just don't think, I feel like that we can address the issues of climate change without having this in here.
Okay.
Comment.
Is that the end of that?
Let's just stay with one.
I've got
Well, I think
about
what
5 or 6 more
Sarah just
comments.
said, other people have
You-
comments on
Okay.
his
If
section.
you want to comment on
Go ahead.
this,
Yeah, I mean, this is the first document that this very professional planning group has put climate change in. Of all the hundreds of documents that the plan they've done for cities. Because, as it shows on page 4 of the introduction, not page 4, I think, that the American Planning Association recognizes the severity of climate change to everything that happens from here on out. So if we want, my comment's going to be, if the city does not want to include climate change in any of the planning, then yes, take it out of the document. It also means you do every reference to resiliency, of trying to make things local and better for the community, because that's part of climate change. And so you either leave it in, you include it in your planning, or you take it out, one way or the other.
Okay. All right, thank you. I noted that. Mr. Sellers, back to you, please.
Page 43 on the place type maps, and I've got two relations to this, but I'll start with this one, and that's to, my request is to remove all suburban neighborhood low 10 and optional, to go back to the original of suburban low, because as defined later in the document, the 10 and option is actually higher density than the median neighborhood, and I think that's, you probably already heard comments about this, but that's one of my concerns, is that we're putting high density outside of the suburban neighborhoods that already exist. It's not like type developments.
Okay.
So that was just a quick suggestion there. That's my request.
Do you have any ideas of where then, as an alternative, where the additional multifamily or townhomes should be placed?
I would hope that we could figure out ways to do that closer into the city center. I don't know how that is, but that's really where the high density should be. And that's where the townhouses and so forth should be, to allow for the mobility, easy mobility of people access. What that is going to require, I do not know.
Okay.
I don't have a suggestion, but I feel like that putting clusters outside the periphery is not, and this is sort of going to flow right into my next comment, which is on page 49. Let's see, 49. Yeah, there's a guy. The guy at the top of the page makes a comment. James Kunstler, planning critic. The two elements of suburban pattern that cause the greatest problems are the extreme separation of uses and the vast distances between things. And I think that is the exact opposite of what most people in Tullahoma think. Because most of us, we like having our space. That's one of the things that's unique about Tullahoma, is that you have neighborhoods that aren't all clumped up on top of each other like in Murfreesboro. And you can walk around your neighborhood without having a lot of traffic.
Okay.
When
So
you think,
remove the quote?
well, I just disagree with the quote, because that's from an outside perspective, not from an inside perspective. I feel like I can go across town and get less than 15 minutes. Now, I understand in Murfreesboro, where you would want this, you can't get anywhere in 15 minutes. But in Tullahoma, you can go one to the other, and that's why Tullahoma's different.
That's page 49. It's all the images, and then there's a quote in the upper left-hand corner.
Later, and I can't that's not how to address this, but you had, I guess it's on page 55, the traditional neighborhood new. It says in the document that you're going to move it to page 51. I would like to just say we just eliminate that.
The traditional neighborhood.
Eliminate that section, because again, the high density is not what I feel like most of the people that I've talked to want in Oklahoma, and so that would be requested to not actually have that section in there. I'm about done. Page 108.
Page 108.
And this is in relation to, let's see, it says there, it talks about in the upper left section there, and I think this one doesn't look like it's lined out like it was online. There was something there that was lined out, but it talks about when you grow into the urban growth boundary that you would, it's proposed that a TNN located in a peripheral area, which again is what I'm asking we not have, that it would grow into the urban growth, that that section would really be converted back to say that if the urban growth boundary is expanded into, that it would be like the suburban neighborhood low as it currently is.
Okay, so remove T and N. Okay.
That is correct, because that terminology is TN-N is the traditional neighborhood new, right? That's the polka dot areas that you have abutting up against the urban growth boundary, right? Okay. All right, then the last is just a general comment. Similar to what I was talking about with utilities, it'd be good to see what existing roads would look like if we have significant growth in the projected areas out around the city. For example, what would Kings Lane and Country Club look like if we had to grow that? What would be the impact on that's a suburban load, local, whatever it is, I can't remember the name of it, but the designs in there, you know, are, you know, have the roadway designs say this.
Cross sections.
But there are a couple that are, what page is that on?
All the road cross sections start on page 62.
Okay, so the confusing thing for me was, okay, we have suburban street, and that's got sidewalks and bike lanes on both sides, but would that be Country Club, or would it be because it's more like a local suburban street?
Country Club is, suburban street. Yeah, so on the map on page 61, Country Club is the kind of pumpkin color. So that's a suburban street. So then you look on page 63 and it shows you the cross section of that suburban street. So it would remain to be, Country Club is 2-lane drive aisle now, drive lane. It would remain a 2-lane drive lane, but bicycle lanes would be added, street trees would be added, and sidewalks would be installed on both sides.
Is that only if we start changing it? I mean, I think someone made a comment, they like the street like it is now. To do this, you're going to take a lot of property on each side of Country Club to add 2 bike lanes, along with the trees, along with sidewalks on both sides. I don't know that many people have complained that I know of have been complained about Country Club or Kings Lane as the way it is, but this looks like an intrusive change to a lot of our current streets.
Yeah. I can say that I've checked this because other people have made that comment. The majority of Country Club Lane in Short Springs already has a 60-foot right-of-way. So these improvements would fit.
Would not take any extra.
Right, the city already owns them. There are a couple sections where it gets thinner, but the majority of the right-of-way is already 60 feet. So there would not be a need to take additional easements, or request additional easements from those property owners.
Okay.
We did receive, or the consultants did receive comments, and you can review it in the plan, a desire to have bike lanes and additional sidewalks in the city.
Okay.
So they
wonder how many that was from, though. I guess
I'll say that.
You like that?
That's terrible.
Okay.
But you can't get anywhere on a bike without getting run over.
Right.
So
we don't have any bike lane on Country Club right now, right?
you have that stupid thing that they call a bike trail.
Sidewalk. Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah, so there was a lot of
But
input
it's for
about the
walking.
desire to have bike lanes and sidewalks on
What
the main road.
so this would essentially get us though to the same current flow that we have right now, the volume of traffic. What's going to happen when they add, you know, Anderson Farms out between Brookfield, on out Short Springs, all the traffic coming through? Is it going to have to go to Suburban Avenue? It doesn't talk about, well, if we do this growth, and these are the roads that are going to have to go from 2-lane to 4-lane. It would have been nice to say, based on projected growth, as you did in the utilities about what do they call it, you know, here's what we have, and this is our, well.
Build out?
Just the, I can't think of the terminology it was, this is what we should do.
Yeah.
Your plan, you know.
Yeah.
There's no plan that says what's gonna happen and where, because a lot of people don't know that, you know, if we add all these properties out here, then that country club has to go to 4-lane, Kings Lane has to go to 4-lane. Are people gonna be excited about that? I don't think so. So there's not a similar type layout of what seats, what roads would have to change
Yeah.
based on projected growth.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I'll stop saying that. The transportation planner that was part of the consultant team will be at the meeting on September 19th, so that's a question you
Okay.
specifically ask her. But typically, when you complete a comprehensive plan and you look at the projected growth numbers, then you propose the required road infrastructure to support that growth pattern.
And I don't see that.
I think that they're.
That would be nice to see.
She can certainly, I'm not gonna speak for her at this point.
It's just so that people understand what are gonna be impacts coming forth.
I understand.
Anyway, projecting growth, you would have a 4-lane country club anytime.
I don't believe so either, but I'm not misspeaking at today's meeting. I can't project what the consultants were not thinking. It's my assumption that yes, she looked at the existing growth pattern, and because you're not seeing major roads widening proposed, that the existing infrastructure should be able to handle.
Okay.
But again, that's a direct question for her on the 19th.
Thank you.
Was that it?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I want to commend you. You did exactly what we were requesting today. You went through the plan, you did your research, you went page by page. Thank you. Sir, yes? What's your name?
Dan Thomas.
Okay.
I live at 104 Huntington Place in Brookfield.
Brookfield, okay.
I was just talking with a friend of mine who lives in Murfreesboro, kind of complaining about what was going to happen to the property between Brookfield and Blantonwood, the Kennedy property. I've got a picture here of a site plan development from PK Enterprises, and it has 104 units on that skinny property between Brookfield and Blantonwood. And I just pointed out to my friend there'll be 2 backyards in that property backed up to my backyard, which right now has a lot of trees, a lot of privacy. And he said, "Oh, you're just a NIMBY." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, growth is coming, but you don't want it in your backyard, not in my backyard." But I'm just concerned about why, if this is all just being proposed, why does a construction company have plans on that site?
A property owner has the right to sell their property at any time.
Yeah.
So the Kennedy property is currently zoned R1. So the owners of the Kennedy property have the right to sell their property to a developer to develop a subdivision under the existing R1 zoning. That potential project this plan isn't a catalyst for that project. They could have done that project 20 years ago under the R1 zoning district that existed then.
Right. Well, that's
Does that answer your question?
But there's a for sale sign in front of the Kennedy property,
Right.
and it's not sold. So how? I don't know what the.
When someone is looking at, it's a common practice, when somebody is looking to develop property, they will see if the property can be developed like they want. So they'll draw out a draft plan saying, okay, how many lots can I create? How much road am I gonna have to put in? Am I gonna have to put in fire hydrants? They call it a feasibility study. So they do feasibility study before they purchase the property to make sure that they can do what they want to do. So they draw up draft plans to kind of see what, if the project may or may not work, or the project may or may not meet codes.
So
My
before they
friend was
close-
very, oh, I'm sorry.
I think what she's saying, probably before they close.
Before they close on the deal.
It's contingent on them seeing
Oh.
if this type of development would make it through our planning
Right,
process.
because they don't want to buy the property and then they can't get their subdivision approved, then they're left owning the property. So that's a common
Yeah.
real estate practice.
Yeah, my friend who lives in Murfreesboro commended the planning commission because he says growth is coming. You can depend on that. This morning I was in another meeting. There were 5 people there that had moved in just recently, one from Oregon, 2 from California, 1 from Detroit, and 1 from Chicago. So people are finding out about this area. They're going to come, and like I said, I'm kind of being a NIMBY, not in my backyard, but it's coming, and thank you for developing the plan so we can accommodate the growth that's coming.
Mr. Thomas,
Go ahead.
okay, I just wanted to say, I don't want to belabor this. I know a lot of people are waiting to get their comments out, but I just wanted to say, I think, you know, just broadly speaking, most people that we've heard from are concerned about what's going to happen to Tullahoma, right? All of us, I think, either moved here or stayed here because we love the character of what is here right now, and we don't want that to change a lot. I think, you know, I'm not a professional economist, but I think there are a lot of different factors that are happening that are creating demand here for people to move. But I think we've got some things such as not being right on the interstate that is, and probably plans like this and careful, thoughtful zoning practices. But I think we have an opportunity to control some of the growth and how quickly it happens, the phasing of what gets built, how we issue permits, things like that. And so I don't want people to be afraid. I think that it's not going to happen to us at that pace that we've seen some of these communities that are closer into the large metro areas that are located on I-24. But we do have some demand here, some pressure for people wanting to move in, and it's different reasons. I hope that what we can do is continue to develop like Tullahoma has in the past, where we have some places for what I would say the workforce to live, but by and large, it's a lot of the managers and executives and higher income professionals that move here. And a lot of those who are commuting or more workforce are in Shelbyville or Manchester or locations where they can more easily hop on the interstate. But that's Jennifer Moody's opinion, and I think you guys I wanted to share that with you.
Concerning something like that strip of property, which is right now is all wooded area, is there anything in the new plan that would help try to preserve some canopy? You know, one of the persons I talked with talked about, you know, we're cutting down lots of trees and we're getting less and less trees. Is there a way to help? Is there a way in the zoning to help restrict? You know, you can't take just and wipe it all down to dirt and build up houses.
I can say that in the current code, there are no tree preservation regulations. The plan does say, and I can't point to the exact page, but there is language about explore the feasibility of writing a tree preservation ordinance, explore the feasibility of revising the landscaping code.
78.
Page 78. The only thing that the city has is that once a developer applies for a preliminary plat approval for a major subdivision, they cannot come in and remove trees at that time. However, what is a unfortunate common occurrence is that someone would buy the piece of property, clear it, and then apply for the preliminary plat.
Well, I noticed that's already happened near Somerset. All of that,
Yeah.
all the trees have already been cut down, and they haven't applied for anything.
Right. The thought, let me elaborate. The thought is that once you apply for a preliminary plat, you can't remove any trees because then the planning commission would have the opportunity to try to recommend or require some tree preservation. But unfortunately, I've seen it happen many, many times. They remove the trees and then file, so technically, if they didn't violate the code.
Okay.
But that is in the plan to explore the option of tree preservation.
Comment about that.
Oh, go ahead, Bob, no, go ahead.
That gets back to what Tullahoma values. They value the tree cover and the amount of trees that we've had in this area historically and how that's been handled? Or do we value the individual's rights over the commons good in some particular areas? So it's a matter of values. Values are what we're going to make, it's what the people make it. So if you want tree preservation, you're going to have to speak up about it because it ain't going to come from the top down.
Yeah, and that's on page 78, that recommendation about to consider adoption of tree preservation ordinance, and the consultants had bullet points specifying how to go about that.
Oh, one more comment. They could change the wording to, we shall come up with a tree ordinance instead of we should come up with a tree ordinance.
Ma'am, what was your name?
Susie Miller, and I live on Kings Lane.
Okay.
And I do have a concern about Kings Lane, and I agree that it's going to have to be widened if all this comes to be. But my question is, who are they anticipating moving into these apartments? Are they doing it on a build it and they will come basis? And the next part is, are they being built for refugees?
So I'm happy to start. We did have an economist on the team with the Walker Collaborative, and one of the specific things we asked him to do for us was a housing market analysis, and that's in the appendix of the plan. But the reason we asked for that is because we kept hearing from our employers, from citizens, story after story about trying to recruit people and them not being able to find housing here, and saying, you know, what we really seem to be lacking is a diverse mix of housing types. They said, you've got single family housing, and there are many people who have been able to transition here by buying a house, but they said there's a lot of other people that we can't recruit because there's not a place for them to rent, a townhouse, an apartment, something temporary, so they can then kind of figure out where they want to live and buy later. I've also heard it from our Motlow and UTSI. You know, UTSI is a graduate program, so people come and they're typically here only 2 years, and so they really want rental housing. But by and large, they end up renting in Murfreesboro and driving every day. Mr. Markham that walked in, I know you recently recruited a company of engineers to Tullahoma, and I think the first 10 that came, 9 stayed in Murfreesboro because they could not locate housing.
The general manager chose to move in Murfreesboro because he couldn't find housing here
Yeah,
satisfactory.
so I say that to say there are people that are driving in to work in Tullahoma every day that would prefer to improve their quality of life, not have a long commute, and live here, but they're not finding the type of housing that they need to do that. So what he showed in that housing analysis is that we have a demand over the next 5 years for about 300 units of rental housing and about 400 to 500 units of single family. Single family housing is going to continue to be, I think, the builder's bread and butter. They know that all day they can build that and sell it. But what we hadn't seen is proof that we had a market demand for other types of housing. And so that's what Randall Gross helped show us, that we really do have a demand. But again, I would say it's 300 units over the next 5 years, not, I don't forecast us having the types of developments that you see like in Murfreesboro where one 300 unit apartment building goes up. That's that doesn't fit us, but I think you would see some smaller, 20 unit, 15 unit developments kind of peppered different places in the city.
Are they targeting refugees?
No,
I've
ma'am.
never heard that.
So I think that's a good, I think that's good. It's a small amount, makes sense. But I would like to say that I work with a lot of young engineers out at the base that live in Murfreesboro. Part of it is the housing. The other is there's something to do in Murfreesboro.
Yeah, it is.
And so you can't expect these younger people to be here unless you're going to have, a bar scene or, a big bar scene downtown, which maybe that's in the plan, which I would be okay with, but,
Not everybody.
No, I agree with you. I think just like we see, we see a lot of Tullahoma High School graduates, they leave, go get their education or start their career somewhere else, and then about the time that they start to have their family, they move closer. And I think you're exactly right. A lot that are choosing, it's for the nightlife or social aspects that they feel like there's more life.
Yeah, so
Young people
don't
like
assume
them.
that everybody that wants those townhouses are going to want to come here, because they're not. Even if they're working in Tullahoma, they may want to live up there. So.
Right, but some
Some will,
Right.
yeah.
I may be able to offer a perspective that's different than many people in here. I am one of those developers. So I put myself in a category with good ones and bad ones. And most of the people that I know that have developed in Tullahoma are, for the most part, good developers. There are folks that come in and rape the land. They're not far from here that do that. But it's interesting that we talk about Kings Lane, because I lived at 1405 Country Club Drive in 1972 and lived there for 4 years. There was no Terra Estates. There was no Terra 2. The only thing there was Kings Lane was literally a lane that went from Country Club to Avoca Road. There would be no place for the Millers to live there at that time. And the expansion is going to happen, and there's very little we can do about it. There are some things we can, but there's not much. Things like a decision for AEDC to build a $250 million facility to test hypersonics. I don't think there's anybody in this room that will have any input as to whether they choose to do that or don't. I think those decisions will be made far away, and they may happen in Tullahoma, and they may happen at Wright-Patterson, or they may put it at some other national lab. We have to choose whether or not we want it through our politicians, but if they're coming, we've got to accommodate. And the kinds of people that we're recruiting to come, and right now have to have secret clearances. They're as far away as immigrants as you could find right now, particularly the kind that are being accused of what we're building for. Mixed-use facilities like we talk about, Kings Ridge is one, and again, I'm one who built that. There's condos in the middle of it. There's high density in the middle of it. There's a golf course in the middle of it. There was nothing there prior to that. There was a 9-hole golf course. But the quality that's there were no trees on that land. Actually, there were 3 trees on that land. And you had to climb across fences with just pasture in it, cow patties. And it was not hard to, but many of the people didn't want it for the same reason I'm hearing today. We tried hard when Terra 2 was built to get Kings Lane expanded before it was built, so it would go all the way to the next land, because we didn't have enough cross traffic. And I was told that the Planning Commission really doesn't do that sort of thing. And I accused the Planning Commission of changing, they needed to change their name from the Planning Commission to the Subdivision Regulation Committee, because we need a long-range plan. I served for the state for a bypass around Tullahoma. Nobody wants it in their backyard, okay? We're limited by what we can do because we're in the edge of 3 different counties. That makes it tough. We can't go to Bedford County, we can't go to Franklin County for everything. Lynchburg doesn't necessarily want us anywhere in their property. And so finding property is difficult. You have very large landowners that control a lot of land. And while I'm a large landowner, I'm not nearly as large as the Motlow family and the Air Force that we just can't use. So there's only restricted amounts of land that we can use. We tried hard to get some kind of bypass or cross traffic through. It was going to be, if you knew where Tommy Broadbent and Ted Helms lived in the 70s, that was going to be where the bypass was going to come through, the cross traffic. If you recall when George Vibert was mayor and George Orr was alive and in the real estate business, Kings Lane got expanded to get over to the railroad, under the railroad track, because there was a grant that we could come from the city to get, because of long coal trains, we were able to get an underpass. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get to the hospital if you had a heart attack. But we got Kings Lane to be part of it. But why we had so much bitching from Tara before we could not, and that was my biggest complaint that I've had, has been a contingent of people, some of them are my friends, but they don't want the development in Tullahoma. And it's coming, and we need to be careful about how we get it done. Because I think it's unhealthy to go out Riley Creek Road and only see a few houses along the road with no depth. So all the utilities have to pay for all that out there without any depth, or without subdivisions, or without cross traffic. And if we don't really have qualified exterior folks that know what's going to happen to us, design these things, then we're going to be in trouble. And lastly, I just think that we need to be more open to the, not being so concerned about mixed density as we are, because that's, otherwise nobody is going to be able to afford to move in the area. That, the bypass. And I'll be glad to answer any questions on that, at least on my behalf as a developer. We bought 500 acres out of Avoca in 1976, and I've developed about 5 houses out there in that land. So I'm not trying to do a whole lot of density.
If you'll sign in, if you have out passes around, please, if you didn't sign outside the door, please sign on this.
Okay. I think we
Elizabeth Bowling. I just wanted to make a comment where we've talked about how the higher density and the apartments are being looked at because of people that are here. So I wanted to look at page 67 of the plan. So I think that doesn't, what y'all have been saying today about how these people are here and they want to have these different types of housing. But on page 67 it says that one of the things that needs to be done is to increase the connectivity to I-24 to allow people who want to make Tullahoma an option, because the cost of living has pushed them out further and further from Nashville. So that doesn't seem to go along with what's been said today. It's page 67 of 111. It says to accommodate existing and future demand, especially as Nashville metropolitan region continues to grow rapidly, the rising cost of living and increasing population has pushed residents further and further out, making Tullahoma an attractive option.
I see that. Okay.
So I would ask that, based on what y'all are saying today about what the purpose of looking at higher density, looking at the different reasons that people are moving to Tullahoma, is to, to remove that if that's not a reason that we're trying to attract. Also, it goes along with page Roman.
I would say it differently. We're not trying to attract. They are responding to what is already happening. So we are seeing that people are, those 14 counties that surround Metro Nashville, people have moved out into those counties, and then they moved out beyond those counties because those became unaffordable. People moved to Rutherford County initially looking for affordable housing. Rent rates, mortgage rates, land has appreciated even faster there than what we saw in our last reappraisal. And so they're continuing down I-24, and that's creating that demand that you see in Manchester. Some people, I would say, that's why I say Tullahoma's growth isn't going to be like theirs. Ours is much slower.
But if we
where most people might want to stay there, a few people will shop in Tullahoma or come through Tullahoma and realize, oh, I'd rather be here, and it's worth it to me to drive the extra 15 or 20 minutes to get to the interstate.
But what that paragraph is saying is let's make it not that Tullahoma isn't as accessible to 24, because as I've heard several citizens speak at various meetings that part of the attractiveness and part of the reason that they chose to move to Tullahoma was because it is isolated somewhat, and it is, you know, it does not have the area that it can go into other counties because of the boundaries of the lakes, because of the boundaries of the metro.
Right.
So
I think they're saying it would be a benefit for tourists and these commuters if we could improve that connectivity. But I hear what you're saying. You want to push back on that and say, maybe to keep Tullahoma the character that it is today, we don't want to create any new
You just said that part of the reason that people aren't, because I don't understand why we would want to market Tullahoma as a lower cost option, why we would want to put ourselves to become the Antioch of Murfreesboro. And so I think that saying that this is what we're going to do because we have these companies, and like that gentleman said, you know, some people are going to choose to live in Murfreesboro because they want to live in Murfreesboro. They want to live in a big city. They want to have, you know, that's what they want. People who are moving to Tullahoma are, you know, what I've heard from citizens is we want to attract people who want to live in a small town of Tullahoma, not in Murfreesboro, or they would live there. So I would just ask that, it seems that that paragraph doesn't really go along with what has been said as far as, you know, don't worry about the rapid growth because it is not as accessible to 24 as Manchester, and yet it says in the plan that one thing they want to do is increase that connectivity so that commuters won't have as far to go and we can attract them here.
I think it's noteworthy that the state of Tennessee's Department of Economic and Community Development has designated the industrial site in Manchester as the #1 site for a new automotive plant. That's used to be the one in Memphis and got occupied by Ford. So the state is doing everything they can to recruit either a large prime or sub to locate within 15 miles of Tullahoma. That's going to drive a lot, you know, thousands of jobs directly for that employer and other employers servicing it. The question is I don't know if there's anything we can do to prevent that or to make it happen faster. We do need the flexibility in a planning commission design to accommodate either one. A second thought is that it's just happened recently that Chick-fil-A bought a new piece of property over in Manchester. They can choose to not do anything. They could choose to close the one in Tullahoma. They could choose to move to Manchester. They could choose to do both of them. Those are market conditions that will change regardless of what the people in this room decide. But if we don't grow, they'll move. Will Old Navy move here as planned? Yes. Will they move away if the employment shrinks? Absolutely. When we recruited, when I owned Northgate Mall, Joe Lester and a few others, we never expected Dillard's to leave. It was one of the most profitable Dillard's they had. But when the jobs started losing with the AEDC and Lanham and Worth, when those started going out, and when Wilson Avenue, the malls started shutting down, they left. So we can't control the growth with a certain amount. We've got to be able to be flexible, slow down the growth or increase the growth. Now, right now, the housing market is just almost stopping because the interest rates have gone up to 2%. So if people went to, you know, a few months ago, your house would probably had bidders out trying to outbid each other, and everybody sold for above the real retail price. Nothing that we did to change that, but now they may be on the market for 30 days. So we've just got to be able to accommodate all of those things.
Sir, you had a
It
comment?
requires a plan.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Dan. Sir, yes, what was your name?
Tommy Northcott, Hickory Hills.
And what neighborhood are you in?
Hickory Hills.
Hickory Hills, okay.
I agree, growth is happening. There's no doubt about that. I agree with the comments that folks are saying that we've got to control it, do what we can, that we want to grow like we have in the past. But I don't think this plan reflects that. The problem I have with this plan is what appears to be a broad brush of changing the zoning to accommodate the high density housing. And what was said yesterday was it's intended to make it easier for developers with less public hearings, less requirements to develop the high density at whatever style that they would like in these areas. And that to me is not controlling it. That to me is breaking down the checks and balances that we're intended to have as a community to be able to say what kind of development that we want. Now, do we need some high density? Do we need some apartments? We do. I would argue that we have that capability in our current zoning, so why do we have to have such a drastic change in our zonings of the city for this plan?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Great Power, we're in Terra Estates. I just had a few comments on the plan. One is, looking at the current state, on page 9 it talks about the drainage, and it says it's good in some areas. I don't know where they got that, I don't know who did that, but I'll tell you, Terra Estates, it ain't good. It is horrible, and it's probably the same. I don't know any place in Tullahoma where it's good, and there's areas where it says it's good. So, you know, if you base any decisions on that, let's change that, because it is not.
And you said page 9?
Yeah, I think I got a version that was on the internet. I don't know if it's the same as we got here.
It's not, it's a little different.
Okay, so it was just a map of the drainage.
Yes,
Yeah.
right. And
it
you
had
were
green
exactly
areas.
right when you see
It has
it.
green areas in
Yeah.
Terra and over in Anderson Farm area and all, and I would say that that's nonsense. So it's, you know, I don't know where that comes from.
Anybody though that lives on Tower Boulevard could tell you that's nonsense.
It's a
Yeah,
freaking.
When it rains, the water's above the curb.
yeah.
Yes, that's
Even-
right in front of my house.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah, I
the mail
noticed
woman
that,
complains about it.
I've looked at old topographic maps and old drainage maps before
On the other
Terra
end.
was developed, and there were drainage
it's
ways that went right
Yes,
in creeks, but that went right through Terra Estates.
right. And they still go through Terra, but they're above ground now.
Right. Okay.
Okay, anyway, just if you make any decisions based on that, it ain't right.
This, I will say the purpose of this map typically is just one piece of information for us to try to look
Sure.
at where future development could occur and to more
Based on
say,
soil
oh, the environmental conditions aren't right and it probably isn't likely in this
Right.
area.
Well, and I'm
So
just
that's what
saying-
we would use it for.
Right, I'm
Yeah.
just saying, make sure it's
Yeah.
accurate, because right now it doesn't look accurate.
And if you've noticed
And
in
it wouldn't be for
places-
existing areas that are already developed, it'd be looking really at those areas that are undeveloped.
Yeah.
And make sure that's right, because it ain't right.
Yeah.
And that was a question I had about page Roman numeral 4, where it talks about discouraging the disturbance of wetlands and what you just said as far as the city wanting to take into consideration the wetlands that are there and not want to make the same mistakes that were made in Terra, where the creeks now are above ground. And if you look at the map, a lot of the large agricultural areas that are there to be developed are where wetlands and creeks and floodways and floodplains are. And so where on page Roman numeral 4 it says they want to discourage the disturbance of wetlands, but then when you look through the plan and it shows, you know, here's good areas for development, it is the wetlands and the floodplains. So I would ask that that be addressed, to either say that that there's not a concern about disturbing the wetlands and the floodways, or to either make here's some good spots for development, not be on top of those wetlands, floodplains, and floodways. So that's on page Roman numeral 4. And then in the...
So here, are you saying, so then...
Just one way or the other, but not both ways in the plan.
So remove the environmentally sensitive areas from high-density developments?
Yes.
Okay.
Or either remove from the beginning and in the environmental area where it says there's concern about developing those. One or the other.
You jumped in, you weren't done, sir.
Not quite, okay. So, again, I don't have the current thing in front of me, but on page 33, it had a map of, I think, the current zoning where it had the Anderson Farm and agricultural. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. The next page, and it shows all the current zoning, right? On the next page, there's a statement in italics, and it says, the city's current zoning features much more residentially zoned land than will be needed to satisfy market demand for many years to come. Okay, so it's currently zoned agricultural. Why would you need to add more residentially zoned areas if it's already zoned agricultural? So that if it says that in the plan that we don't need it, what's the point of changing it? So that's just a concern. It doesn't. Later on in the plan, it does show it as the TNN SBL as a proposed. I know it's not already there, but I also understand that if you approve this plan, that it would you would have deference. You would give deference to the plan if you are going to rezone. So,
and you're right.
I would propose that you just don't change it. I mean, if it's not needed, you don't change it. That's all. If it is needed to meet the plan, then that's fine. Okay. So
specifically, for the Anderson Farm.
Well, any of them that are currently not zoned agricultural, that are not zoned residential. It doesn't matter. Anderson Farm is just an example.
Yeah.
There's a couple others like that too.
Okay.
And there's all it says on. So the one before it shows all the residentially zoned areas. And then the next page it says we got plenty of residential areas zoned in order to meet all our demands. So that means that there's no need to change any other zoning to meet your demands.
So
absent other factors, right? So that your point is exactly spot on. What this is saying, looking at the land available and already zoned for residential, we have much more than is needed to support the growth that they're projecting. What we don't have control over is developers or ownership, right? And so those other factors, whatever economic or financial factors play in, when developers come in, and sometimes it's schools too, proximity to schools or already built roads or utility availability, whatever it is that's informing that decision, someone has bought a piece of agriculture property and thought, I'd rather try to get it rezoned and do all this other stuff than buy something already properly zoned.
Well, and so they bought it.
But
they bought it with the understanding that it would be rezoned, because they wouldn't have bought it if they thought it was just going to be agricultural. You know, they had to think that it was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to translate what you're saying into something that for the plan. So there's a difference between the plan map and the zoning map. So under the existing plan that was adopted in 2012, the Anderson Farm and most of the property that's zoned agricultural is in a low-density residential place type or land use category, which allows for consideration of rezoning to R1. Under the proposed plan that we're working on now, on page 42 of the plan, you can see that they've created a new rural place type, which has a 2-acre minimum lot size recommended.
For what?
For development.
For
so perhaps the agricultural land, the lands that zoned agricultural could be placed in the rural place type which is recommending if you are going to develop those lands, that the lots have to be at least 2 acres or greater.
Sure.
You
But
see, I
that's
mean,
not
like
what-
the zoning has to implement, the plan implements the zoning, so they should match. So if you want lands to remain agricultural with very large, with the possibility of development, but you want the lots to be very large, the appropriate place type under the new plan would be the rural, not low-density residential.
Right, but that's not what's in the plan. It's the SBL.
I know, but we're taking comments on
Yeah,
revision.
yeah, okay,
so maybe that is a
sure.
revision, if that's your
That
goal
would be
is
a
to
revision.
preserve.
I agree with that.
Yeah, if you're trying to preserve the land
Right.
that's zoned agricultural now
Right.
and not allow those properties to be developed
Yeah.
to quarter-acre lots or
Right.
full subdivisions, perhaps a recommendation would be to reevaluate the current land zoned as agricultural to perhaps put it in a rural place type.
Sure.
Did you
Does that make
follow the
sense?
reference to the map that's in front of you right now? The one right there, the big map that's right in front of you, that's the old map.
Okay, and that's not what I mean, the other one, that map, as far as I know, is not shown in the plan.
No, that's the current map.
That's
that we're
the
working on.
2012
That's
plan.
right.
I understand,
2012
but you never showed this in the plan as the current state. In the current plan, it showed what is actually,
The zoning.
what the actual zoning is, which showed it as agricultural. Okay, so this one I've never seen.
Yeah, that's the one we work under now, so that property is zoned R1, and it's R1 on the new plan too. Like she
So
said,
it's not
but it's not
currently zoned R1 right
It's
now.
not zoned R1, it's zoned agricultural, it's in the low-density land use category.
Yeah.
Right, so the developers, they're not even developers, the property owners that bought the Anderson Farm, I told them, you're zoned agricultural, right now, the only thing you have the right to is to develop under your agricultural zoning.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
But they could request
They can,
R1
they have
in
the
the
property
current-
right to
under the
request a
current plan.
rezoning.
Right. And if the current plan, though, if you pass the Tullahoma plan here that we have,
2040
the 2040 plan, then it has it as recommended to be zoned SBL, TNN.
Actually,
Which
it's in,
would-
it's actually not SPL now, it's suburban neighborhood low, TNN optional is what they've changed it
Yeah,
to.
right, right. Yeah, but I'm just saying that, yeah.
Which
whatever.
allows for high density.
Right. And so, anyway, I think you see my point.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other one, let's see, just one more. Sorry.
No, don't.
Oh, actually,
While we're here.
there's a couple, just make a comment on the access to the airport thing. I will tell you that we've been here for 30 years, not as long as the Markhams, but, and we raised both our kids here. Now they're gone. It's like, they were done with Tullahoma, and so we're here. I would love to be able to go get on a plane and go visit them often. It's a pain. So I would say that I would love a way to get access to the airport much more quickly than we have now. If we had a shuttle service, I don't care if it brings in people from Nashville or not, I'd like to have access. So I would disagree with that. I wish we had a better way, a quicker way to get to the airport.
It'd be nice to have an airport shuttle.
An airport shuttle,
Tullahoma
that's
to
right,
Nashville.
exactly, because going up and having to park your car up there is ridiculous. So anyway.
Well, that might be a new
Just
local
a-
business
yeah,
venture,
that's right.
something the Rim might want to jump on.
Just a
You can
comment.
start that.
So the other comment is, the last comment, is that these neighborhoods, these mixed-use TNN neighborhoods, personally, I think they're good. I think there's a use for them. I think there's a place for them. Everyone I've ever seen, though, is on a major road with an access to that major road directly. So that you have this large group of people that have access to the major road, so they can get somewhere. I mean, you can't have all the services in that neighborhood. So I would just like to say that, make sure that when you do this, if any of them are approved, I don't know how to force this, but they should never go through an existing residential neighborhood. It is ridiculous to have that as even an option for something like that, because then that will be a major outlet for a large neighborhood, and that will then destroy the neighborhood, the character of the current neighborhood. And that's true no matter where you put it on the map.
So what you were saying is that and we're hearing a lot of different comments and a lot of different recommendations, but what you're saying, as I'm writing down, that if the TNN place type were to remain, it should be just located on main
roads,
arterial and collector roads.
And you should never have a new neighborhood come in that has an outlet through an existing neighborhood. That would be that's a disaster.
Okay.
Anyway,
Any other comments?
That's it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Sir in the back with the blue shirt?
Yes, I'm Jerry Sperling. I live on Hamilton Lane, which is just around the corner off of West Lincoln. I have a comment, then a couple of 3 questions. We have a just open new planned unit development of townhomes, West Lincoln.
Yeah.
I looked up the definition of a townhome. May I read that? It's very quick. A townhome, townhouse is a type of terraced housing. A modern townhouse, townhome is often one with a small footprint on multiple floors. There are, I think, 12 units, basic, about as basic apartments. I don't know if they're for sale, I haven't done my homework, but it's about as basic of high-density housing as you can get. And I think that's the reason probably part of our community is a little bit leery of planned unit development of townhomes. And it's right in the middle of an R1 neighborhood. So can you now put a planned unit development of townhomes in the middle of any R1 neighborhood? Could you tear a house down? Just because there's an empty lot there, can we fill it up with high-density housing? And I think that's part of the community's question. Is that what we want? And so we now have our planned unit of development of townhomes. And if there are any more built, we'd like to share those. And let the rest of the community participate in that. And maybe I haven't had a chance to study the plan, so I'm not going to critique it. I don't think if you read the book, you shouldn't comment. But I've been to some of the meetings, and I did have it to review for about 3 days. So I've had a chance to flip through, and looking at it online, that's not my best way. So I would appreciate it if you could put a copy in the library.
Okay.
For the community
Yes.
to have easy access to it.
And actually, now that I'm hearing the words coming out of your, I'm looking at you and I'm hearing you say that, you made that recommendation to me before and I forgot. So I apologize for that.
And
You made that
I'll say,
recommendation at the
I
planning
appreciate
commission
what you're doing. You have been a great addition to our community. Thank you for your homework and your planning, and at least the meetings I've attended where you've answered questions. Second thing, I have been in Tullahoma since 1958, probably longer than Dan. I'm looking around the room and I don't see anybody that's been here longer. And I have watched, one man, okay. I have watched Tullahoma grow with little or no planning. We need a plan. Now, a plan, all it is to give you direction. I used to tell my counterparts out at the center that a plan just documents where you changed from, because it's going to change over time.
Right.
So you need that just as a guide. Second comment, a plan, as what little bit I've looked at, it notes possibilities. Just because it's possible doesn't mean you have to do it. In other words, what's in the best interest of the community. Third, is there an impact fee in Tullahoma on?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm helping pay for our new sewer plant. Well, I added to it. I came to Tullahoma. But I remember when we had a moratorium on sewer taps, the government said you cannot hook up any more sewers. I now pay 1.61 times my water bill helping pay for that. So who is going to pay for, obviously we're going to have a bigger sewer plant, the roads, any of our infrastructure. We are being impacted by out-of-town traffic right now. I don't know if you have been at the corner of Cedar Lane and Highway 55 at 7 till 8:30 in the morning and watched the traffic that comes from Moore County. It backs up and people cut off and go down First Avenue to bypass the stoplight. Then you switch to the afternoon and traffic backs up to the bridge and they're cutting back the other way and cutting through that neighborhood. So there's some immediate things we need to do and then long term.
Yeah.
And
yeah, interestingly, for people going on, if you look at page 14 of the plan, it shows commuting patterns, and it says that a little bit over 9,000 people live outside of Tullahoma but work in Tullahoma. So 9,000 people are commuting into Tullahoma. So that's part of the traffic that you're seeing coming in on West Side, South Jackson, North Jackson. There's 9,000. That's not daily. Some people work at night, some people work on the weekends, but 9,000 people are commuting into Tullahoma.
Does that count the base though as part of Tullahoma?
No. So 9,000 people are coming, let me rephrase this. Over 9,000 people are coming in to work within the city limits of Tullahoma. The base is not in the city limits of Tullahoma. Go ahead, sir.
so, but back to the planned unit developments. Can these be put anywhere in Tullahoma?
Yes, the planned unit development provisions have been in the code since at least, in the zoning code since at least the 1988 code. So yes, it's possible to request a planned unit development in any zoning district. What, in a residential context, what it is that if you, under your current zoning, if you're allowed to have 4 dwelling units per acre, then you can still have, as houses, you can request a planned development where you still only get 4 dwelling units per acre, but instead of houses, you can request that they're townhomes or apartments or duplexes. And again, the planned unit development process goes through it's a rezoning, so it goes before the Planning Commission through a public hearing and 2 Board of Mayor and Alderman public hearings. So, but yes, you have the right to ask for that. The property owners have the right to ask for that option.
Based on our code or based on, so could the plan say, let's change the code so that we limit where PUDs can be requested?
Yeah, I think you could put that in the plan.
One more than I've said. But when does a basic apartment change to a townhome?
Okay. I'm going to explain it to you. No, it's fine. I've had to explain this to people. So there's ways that you can inhabit properties. So either you can own a property or you can rent it. And then there's architectural style. Yeah. So architectural style, an apartment is an architectural style. It's where you can share walls and floors and ceilings with other units. Duplex is an architectural style, where a duplex is 2 dwelling units owning a shared wall. A townhome is an architectural style, where there's more than 2 units sharing walls. Now, townhomes can be rented, or you can own it as a condo. You can rent or own a unit in an apartment building you can have a condo apartment building. So there's 2 different things. They can all be owned and rented, and then there's duplexes as an architectural style, townhomes which are shared walls, and then on top of each other in shared walls are apartments.
But when I hear townhome, I think of a New York brownstone or zero lot line, 2-story with a porch and usually have a garage.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've seen, and my son lives in Collierville. They've developed a lot of these around, and they're very nice. I could live in one. You don't have to cut much grass.
But no, yeah, by definition, those townhomes can have those elements, but the pure definition is just multiple units sharing a common wall.
Well, I'm just saying, we have 12 basic apartments across the street from 250,000, maybe close to now 300,000. I think the home just around the corner sold close to 300,000. So architecturally, probably for that lot where it is in one of the older, probably oldest Tullahoma neighborhoods, probably was good thing to put in there. But I'm just wondering, do we want these all over Tullahoma? So, thank you.
You're welcome. Sir, what was your name and neighborhood, please?
My name is Bill McCord.
Bill McCord, okay.
I no longer live in Tullahoma, and I haven't lived in Tullahoma in years.
Okay.
I found out that y'all were going through this process, and it was of interest to me because it's part of my profession. I've heard a lot of comments here. Some of them are half-truths and so forth, as I understand it. I understand the community a lot. Probably know it as well as anybody, even though I haven't been here in a long time. I do want to warn against perceptions and thoughts of not having a well interconnected roadway system, whether it's local roads, collector, or arterial roadways. You're creating problems for yourself when you do not have a well interconnected roadway. And many developments, particularly from about the 80s on, were built in isolation. And that's going to come back to create problems for not just traffic circulation and overwhelming prematurely your level of service on your collector and arterial roadways, but it's also going to be a possible problem with emergency response. And so you're increasing your vehicle miles traveled when you do that. It creates more emissions into the atmosphere and so forth. And there's a whole slew of issues. And believe me, it's been tried many other places, and there's been a lot of consequences for that. So developments like Terra Estates, when they were built in the 70s, they had stub streets that were to the east, and to the north, to the south, and guess what? People don't want to live. People want to live on a cul-de-sac, apparently. Well, 300 or 400 unit subdivision on a cul-de-sac creates real problems, particularly for Country Club Drive in the long range, as well as when other properties are developed. So it looks like it sounds like there's a big sentiment from what I've read, social media, against growth in Tullahoma. And that may be, and that's the way it is where I am. There's a backlash for growth, and we're one of the fastest growing communities in Tennessee right now. We have been for 8 years or so. We're dealing with it as best we can, and so I think that it's important for y'all to plan for growth, because otherwise you're going to get problems that have been created by development patterns that have been perpetuated for 30 or 40, 50 years in Tullahoma without long-term expectations for what that's going to bring. It won't be a good thing if Manchester and Shreveport pass you by and then dictate what happens in Tullahoma. You need to be the leader of this area, southern Middle Tennessee. It has been. I know there's a sentiment that they don't want to do that. I would like to see Tullahoma prosper. I grew up here. And I think it's a kind of this is a crux of this time frame, that if you let that pass you by here, other communities will dictate what goes on here in Tullahoma, as opposed to Tullahoma dictating what's going on in Tullahoma.
And that's very insightful. Thank you for those comments, Mr. McCord. That's one thing I noticed when I first took this job here in Tullahoma. I started looking at the maps, And I did notice in hearing people talk about traffic on Country Club and Short Springs, and if you look at the maps, and I encourage everybody to look at maps of Tullahoma and the road network, yeah, Terra Estates, Macon Manor, Blackwood, and the others, those are all subdivisions that are just have only one way in and one way out, and they're not interconnected. So all the traffic goes, the only way to get in and out and to get anywhere from all of those neighborhoods is to go on Short Springs and Country Club. There's no other way through interconnection of subdivisions or roads connecting to other main roads to get in and out. So that's part of the issue of you're seeing all the traffic is funneled on the one road and traffic isn't being dispersed through interconnectivity. So that's kind of, I understand the benefit, as Mr. McCord was saying, it's a long benefit. A lot of people like to live on cul-de-sacs and have closed subdivisions, but then on the other hand, you've got to understand the delivery service and the dispersing traffic. So one road isn't going to have like that much traffic pressure.
But that's the only way to get to where you need to go. I mean, what road would you go on other than that?
I'm just saying, as for new developments coming in, we don't want to keep making the same mistakes. I guess in the
Yeah,
same
okay, I agree with that.
Everybody just funneling on one road and not being able to disperse traffic.
Kathy Williams.
Yes.
I'm in Hunters Ridge now, but I lived on Kings Lane for 7 years.
What was your name, Kathy?
Williams.
Williams, okay.
And during school, mornings and afternoon, I had to sit in my driveway for a long time just to be able to get out.
Right.
And it all funnels from Terra Estates and all of that. They all come to Walmart, to the high school and everything through there. So it's like.
So alternative.
Yeah, I mean,
alternative routes.
So if you put more on the other side of Terra Estates, and they come through the Terra Estates, so to be more crowded.
Right.
So if you don't do anything about not having buses and everybody dropping kids off, my thing is that maybe the schools ought to have little satellite areas where kids can be taken to, and a bus could be there to take them to school, so that it's not so crowded on the roads.
Or just
That's
buses.
an interesting idea. Like
Collector area.
what do they call it? What's that word where you park? Like park and ride almost. Park and ride almost, yeah. That's not a bad idea. Yeah, drop them off and then the bus comes and picks them up. No, that's a good idea. Okay.
Anyway, help at high school too, for kids that don't have cars.
Yeah.
You go, everybody's crossing the road to go to, so it's
I
like,
know. I honestly, I don't understand how people do it. Luckily, I don't have school-age children anymore. They've all been grown. But yeah, I guess having to leave work to go pick up your kids from school.
I've noticed an awful lot of comments on Tullahoma Talk. The people who are moving here saying, what's the deal? No
I know,
school buses.
I was surprised when I moved here too that there weren't school buses. I've never heard of that. So, sir, I'm sorry.
We used to have school buses.
Okay.
They were private owned.
Oh, they were?
And we paid to have our children taken to school.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes.
Huh.
I don't know how many.
When did that end? Do you remember?
When my children.
80s, 90s?
Well, when I moved to where the children could walk to school.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so.
Is that something that could go in this plan as a recommendation, like in mobility?
Yeah, I mean, it could be under mobility, and there's school facilities, mobility.
Well, they were private buses, like they weren't.
Right.
They didn't look like school buses.
Right.
They might be vans, like.
Right.
vans.
I got you, and you pay like a little tuition. Mobility, schools.
Small business.
Mobility, schools, mobile drop-offs. Okay.
Suggestion.
Oh.
If you're gonna do buses, I think the collector area would be better, because if you're up and down these streets, you're gonna be blocking all the traffic anyway, with all the stop and go. So they're not gonna get anywhere anyway. If you don't collect in one area and then bus a number at one time, that would be a
big benefit, but the otherwise, I think it's like a garbage truck. You're gonna slow all the
Slow
traffic.
traffic down if you make.
Especially
more
when you've
stops.
got Kings Lane, Country Club.
Yeah.
And all that, you'll never get anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, they'd have to be on centralized collection places. And again, that's outside the realm of, I mean, that would be something for the school district to consider. But that's a good input. Ma'am, yes?
When do you, if all this goes through, when do you anticipate construction to begin, and approximately how long do you think all of the construction will take?
Construction to begin for the entire plan?
Streets.
Or street, what?
What?
Can you clarify your question? I'm not following you.
If this passes, when do you anticipate starting building roads and apartments or townhouses or whatever?
I mean, I guess that's just based on the market whenever the developers start finding the land to develop this. And I mean, it's development's happening now. It'll continue to happen.
Okay, do you know about how long, do you anticipate how long it will take to complete this comprehensive plan?
The implementation of this plan will be ongoing. So it's a 20-year plan. Towards the end of the 20 years, then we'll update the plan and we'll continue to implement things that hadn't been completed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We saw that same comment yesterday in the previous session. There'll probably be people that come in after this also in the next sessions. And one gentleman yesterday, and I agree with him, he said that we should change it from a plan to a vision or a plan to a guide, so that it doesn't feel so concrete in everybody's mind that this is exactly what's going to happen. No, it's a guide or a vision that the city has about how we can get there if we go there. So I'd like to see, I know it's a comprehensive plan, but I'd like to see it officially called a guide or a vision.
Well, it's required by the state law though to have a plan.
Right, I mean,
it can be a plan, but you can name it anything you want to.
Okay, I'll put that down as a comment.
I'd like to think of it just a little bit differently. If I think about traveling through Tullahoma versus traveling through Shelbyville, there is now a new road that goes around as a bypass. You don't have to worry about if there's going to be a subdivision, is a bypass going to go through it? You're not going to have to tear down houses. So that road's already there. It took several decades for that road to get defined and built, and they kept it where they wanted to have it. Tullahoma, again, we had a crossroad that was going to be next to the Broadbents, and then it was going to be moved to Kings Lane, then it got moved out to Avoca Lake. But still, Steve Bills built a subdivision out there, Hunter's Ridge. Now you got to go through the middle of it if you put it out there. So we need to have somebody put it down and leave it there, so we won't be making mistakes like I think we've made at Terra and Terra 2.
Yeah.
So
the vision can be to have a bypass.
And traffic isn't
the plan
very
is
important.
actually how to do that bypass once the vision is concretized by all the citizens wanting the vision to be completed.
And you can impose impact fees on developers. If they change to such a degree that it requires it, then they won't do those things because they won't be able to afford it, or they'll go someplace else to do it. But we've got to have a plan, vision for what our traffic is going to be in Tullahoma, and it's got to make sense. And it doesn't make sense today. There's no reason why you have to go Washington Street to get from every part of Tullahoma to AEDC. You just, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, I agree with you.
We certainly intended to try to make it that way, but we ran into lots of roadblocks because people didn't want it in their backyard. Okay, So let's do it before we get to the backyard.
And you're correct in that, and it's like this gentleman was talking about the drainage in Terra. There was a planning commission that approved a plan that ended up with bad drainage in Terra Estates. That's what we don't want to happen. Part of this, whatever we want to call it.
And a dear friend of mine, Jim Shelton, was on the planning commission when I said it needed to be called a subdivision regulatory, because they were more worried just about where the flood waters were going to be on the corner of where Country Club turns around the whole #1 hole. But we still don't do it. We just move it around until the next big problem comes in, or another one wants to build. And in that case for Terra too, it was the Tillett brothers was the problem. And Jim Henry Sr. They actually forced it to go a way that it shouldn't have gone.
Sorry for interrupting.
No, come on in. Come and go. Any other specific questions or comments at this time? Yes, ma'am?
I'm sorry, I have a list.
Hold on, find you again.
Will you tell us? Cindy Watson.
Cindy Watson, yeah, she already started hers.
In comment to Mr. McCord, I don't disagree. I mean, if you look on the west side of town, neighborhood after neighborhood connects. There's ins in and outs, and it makes the traffic flow better. I think the problem is on the east side of town, there are lots of subdivisions that were one in, one out, which it makes a great way of life. With the Anderson Farm situation, because it would connect to Terra, it then makes Terra the same issue that you're saying that Country Club and Kings Lane has. Because if I lived in Anderson Farm subdivision and I wanted to go to Walmart or Publix or anywhere, I'm not going to go out on Lincoln Street and drive all the way around Tullahoma to go to those places. I'm going to come straight to Terra Boulevard. So now you have Terra Boulevard added to the list of problem streets. I think that's where people have that concern of the traffic, because now it's just more and more and more. And Mr. Powers that was here, he was talking about, there's 3 places on the map that are coded in orange. One is Anderson Farms, and then there are 2 other places. I can't tell you the addresses of those, I'll have to go look. But in my understanding of the May 31st Planning Commission meeting, it stated, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm trying to understand this, that if, once the plan is passed, that those 3 orange areas would be designated as mixed areas. Is that correct? Or is that
no.
Okay.
What occurred is that the consultants had designated 3 areas as being traditional neighborhood new, period. So that was the only place type for those properties. What came through the steering committee and the planning commission, they removed the orange category altogether, saying we don't want any property designated where the only option is to do one of these traditional neighborhood news. So the planning commission changed it, those areas, we removed the orange altogether from the whole city, and they replaced it with yellow, which is suburban neighborhood low, and made the traditional neighborhood new an option.
Okay.
So those properties can develop under suburban neighborhood low, which kind of equates to an R1 zoning district now, but they have the option to request to do the mixed use development through the traditional neighborhood new, and that's facilitated through that planned unit development process.
Okay. But you could deny or approve that?
Which, yes, based on a criteria.
Okay. So the automotive plant possibly coming in the area answers a lot of questions that people have. But what percentage rate of growth per year is acceptable to grow in our area? What does the planning commission foresee as an acceptable amount of people coming into each year? Because, we have to look at that for infrastructure. We don't really get overburdened by that.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I can answer the word acceptable, but what is projected based on the housing study that was done, again, by the economists, Tullahoma, since the 70s, had been growing at a rate of about 0.8%. In the past decade, it's jumped up to 1%. This plan for the next 20 years, based on the housing study, kind of reviewing market trends, anticipate at the maximum that the rate would jump from 1% to 2%. So this plan anticipates the maximum development of 2%, and what infrastructure and improvements and facilities would be required to handle that much.
2% in a what time period?
Over the next 20 years.
Okay, so.
Per year.
Per year, right, per year, right. So it compounds.
Okay, so 2%, right now we have 20,000 people in Tullahoma, right? Or close.
Yes.
So 2% of that is 400 people, right?
Yeah, I extrapolate, I did some math exercises. An example at okay, so the current population in 2022 is 20,675. At a 2% growth rate in 5 years, that would jump up to 22,828. So at a 2% growth rate over the next 5 years, there would be an increase of about 2,200 people.
Is that compounded?
Yes.
Each year?
Yes.
So, okay, so just to make sure I understand. So, I'm using Anderson Farms because it's the first one that people are talking about. So, in Anderson Farms, there's over 500 units there. And in the plan, it says there would be 2.5 people estimated per unit on it. So let's just cut it down to 2 on that. So that's 1,000 people right there. So I guess
that would take up half of the potential housing market for the entire city. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, except that I think one of the things we've talked a lot about is what would be the timing of that development? Just like you said, how are they projecting the growth? It's not all in year one, it's over a period of time. And I think that's what gives me some hope that we have control, is that we have control over the phasing of the development and when we issue permits, and we would not allow all hundreds of units to be developed all at one time. We would phase that in over 10 years, 5 years, 10 years,
15 years, 20
to make sure that it was something that would not cause this huge detrimental impact to our schools or to all of the services we provide.
If you don't put the restrictions in the plan like that, then next thing you know, you're going to deny somebody the opportunity to build, and they're going to sue you because you turned them down.
Well, my
we have the legal
control today.
We have the legal authority to do it.
You didn't follow my line of questioning. You publish this plan and say this is our plan for planned growth, and if you don't put this phase in this time period, that phase, a developer's going to come in. They're going to want to put something that you say, well, no, that can't happen for a few years. You deny them. It's not in the plan. They'll take you to court.
Right, I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is that when development occurs on these mixed-use projects, the plan says they have to go through a planned development procedure.
Okay.
That's the only way to get approved.
All right.
Within a planned unit development procedure, the city has and the planning commission has the authority to require phasings.
Again, I would say you needed to make sure it's clear in the plan that they have to follow the phasing. Right now, I haven't seen that. Maybe I missed it.
Okay.
I don't want any more lawsuits for us. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
No, you can speak your...
And that was kind of part of my next part of the question.
Okay.
Because, just based on the last few weeks in listening to some of this, people asking for development, there's 50 homes out at Leonard Mill. There, I believe it's 100 in the Pines. I saw something where maybe, I think it's called the Woodland, has 100 more. So you're already, fulfilling that growth with what you've already done this year. So that was my next question.
And can I tack on to what you're saying? Those houses don't include some other houses that were already approved in 2020, because down between Avoca and Riley Creek, there's 44 homes that were not on that list.
So I'm trying to figure out, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm trying to figure out how we control this 2% growth that we're saying that we're gonna have, when it seems like, in speaking to the man in the green shirt, you know, the developer comes in here and you're going to tell him, no, you can't do this, well, more than likely he's going to go somewhere else. But I just want to make sure that who has control of that 2%? Who is going to say no? How is that going to work to make sure that we're not overloaded? And it kind of seems like we're already approving those. If you take the numbers and look at the numbers, but I'm just trying to understand.
I agree. I think one thing, this was going to ask Mary, if we could try to clarify something. When you're saying approved homes, are you actually meaning the number of platted lots? Yes. Not actually, because I've asked Mary before, this might be a good time to talk about what typical subdivision development process is. And I think there's a confusion between platted lots and what that means and actual building permits. And we watch these numbers really closely, and one thing I've seen is that our number of actually issued building permits for homes has not dramatically increased. Now, what we're seeing, you know, on the horizon though, is that it seems like it's going to, because the number of platted lots, which is, you know, developers coming in and planning subdivisions and getting preliminary approval to sell lots, subdivide land, that's what's increasing right now. So it's not translating into built homes or permits for building homes yet, but I think it will. But I thought, just for the sake of everybody, if we could have Mary talk about that, just so everybody has that same basic understanding, what are these terms that we're throwing out?
Right, so you start out with a raw vacant piece of property, and then you come in to do we call them major subdivisions, which is a subdivision where there's new roads put in and more than 4 lots, typically, is considered a major subdivision. The first step of that subdivision approval is a preliminary plat approval. That is where you lay out the basic design of the subdivision, including the road layout, detention. Those subdivision plats are reviewed by the Development Advisory Committee of the city, which is made up of water, sewer, electric, fire, school district, city engineer, public works, building official, myself, to review against all of the city codes. If a developer or a property owner comes in to do a subdivision, as far as the lot size, they're only required to meet the minimum lot size of the given zoning district that they're in. The zoning ordinance lays out the minimum lot size and the minimum lot width and setback requirements for each zoning district. So then it takes one public hearing before the Planning Commission to approve a preliminary plat. The preliminary plat, again, is evaluated by staff against all city codes and specifically the subdivision control ordinance. So the subdivision regulations lay out exactly all the improvements that are required for a subdivision plat to be approved. Then after the subdivision plat is approved, then the construction plans, which are the civil engineering drawings for all the infrastructure for said subdivision, are submitted through me, and I deliver that again through all the Development Advisory Committee staff members, and they all evaluate the civil drawings to make sure that the infrastructure is the right size water lines, the right size sewer lines, the roads are precise, all of that. And then those are approved. Those usually take a few months to get through the process to get final approval. Then the developer starts putting in all of the infrastructure. All of the infrastructure has to be in place except for the final coat of road. Roads have top coats. Roads have multiple layers. There's like sand, gravel, multiple coats. The final coat of asphalt is, and sidewalks. Everything else has to be installed. Once and inspected. So once all the infrastructure is inspected for a subdivision, except for the final coat of asphalt and the sidewalks, and as a side note, the reason why those aren't put in at the very beginning is because as each lot develops with the houses, they get torn up. Okay, in layman's terms, they get torn up and they have to be replaced like immediately. So then, once all the infrastructure is in place, except for those 2 components, and inspected, then the developer can come in and apply for the final plat, which is the recording document that shows the lot layouts. Then once the final plat is recorded, then the individual lots can be sold. Majority of the developments that I've seen in Tullahoma, at least since I've been here, lots are being sold to individual property owners. Not, developers aren't coming in and building all the houses. So then lot 5 of Mary subdivision goes up for sale, you wait for somebody to buy it, they have to go through the month-long closing process, then they hire a builder. So my point, I think that Jennifer's alluding to, from when a preliminary plat starts to when a house is built can be years. Typically, it's at least 2 years till a final plat is even approved.
May I add something to that?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay.
But I want to point out, make sure today's conversations are civil and respectful.
Okay. Your example that you just gave, in Emerald Meadows, there were 38 lots that were left over that individuals didn't buy. The new one at Pinnacle Court, okay, those are all done by one developer that was sold to somebody in Murfreesboro. Every single one of those approximately 50 homes that are going in are identical with the exception of the reversed elevation.
Okay.
So the statement that you just said that the lots are being bought by people and then they go and find a builder and then have that built is no longer true. The lots are being bought by large developers coming from out of the city and putting in, like I said, in Emerald Meadows and Pinnacle Point, okay? That's 50 homes right there.
Okay. I stated that that was my perception.
Okay. Then one last question that I have. Sure. Yesterday we talked a little bit about economic analysis, okay? And I went to your website, Think Tullahoma 2040, and there's a scope of work there. Is this the same scope of work that you gave when you bid for this planning process, or is this just a generic scope of work?
I think this is the scope of work for the project, and that's very close to
And your scope
what was
of
in
work,
our request for proposal.
and I look at what your schedule is here, you're talking about a 10-month schedule, and I think we're probably close to that right now.
We're way past 10 months.
So when you look at all the tasks that need to be done down here, like charrettes and concept plans, but you go before that, task 2, okay, is the economic assessment and analysis, okay? And the economic and analysis, okay, is research for economic development. And then when you look at, also on your website, is the project team that you identify. There's specifically here Randall Gross Development, Gross Development, Economic Market, an assessment and analysis, which includes financial impact analysis, municipal finance impact, okay, economic impact analysis. And so when I asked you yesterday if that had been done, you told me no, it wasn't done. So I'm trying to understand, if you have this scope of work and you have this capability statement from the team, why did you skip certain scope of work requirements and ignore the capabilities of the company that did this planning?
So I think, like I described to you yesterday, what we hired the team to do, and specifically that economist, for the budget that we had for
Okay.
this project, we asked him to do 2 specific economic analysis.
Okay.
One of them was housing market, and
Okay.
the other was after we had several of these public input meetings,
Right.
and we heard a pretty consistent message that residents were saying we want a public gathering space or an event space or a central place, that they felt like Tullahoma as a community was missing that town center. You know, a lot of communities have a courthouse square or something where people gather, a central plaza. We kept hearing that as a recurring theme, so we knew up front we wanted the housing, and then after we got some input, we said the second thing we want from you is evaluate the feasibility of an event venue or a gathering space.
Okay.
So I
understand that.
agree with you, he probably has those capabilities to do a lot more than what
But
was in
that's
our
in your
scope.
scope of statement of work. So if it's in your scope, that's what you paid them to do, but yet you didn't get it.
I don't think.
The scope of work in that task 2 is talking about the economic baseline analysis, which they did complete.
Right.
It's in Appendix B. And then also the economic development strategies, which they did complete, which is in Appendix E.
Okay.
Yesterday, you specifically asked the question, based on this comprehensive plan, was an economic feasibility study done to say how much all of this is going to cost? That's what you asked yesterday, and that's what I answered. The answer was no.
Okay, and my question, and I may have misquoted it or misstated it, my question now that I look at this statement of work and I look at what the vendor provided back to you, doesn't agree with what you got in there. Because here, planning and transportation economic analysis, including airports, okay? When I look in here, how does the city know that 5 years from now, if the population increases, and I'll just say by 3,000 people, okay? How does the city know that they can economically support that advancement? Because over the next 5 years, if you bring in another 500 homes, how many more inspectors are you going to need? Do you know that? How many more stormwater engineers are you going to need? Do you know that? How many more plan and review and zoning people are you going to need? You don't know that, okay? So that's what I was asking about when, and I look at the state scope of work and I look at what was brought, what they answered back, that their capabilities, it looks like there was no municipal finance and fiscal impact analysis. So I'm asking if that analysis hasn't been done and it's required in the scope of work and it's quoted in their capabilities, why are we on step 8 when that would have been step 2?
The best I can explain, if I can look at this, this is similar to them providing you their background.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, Keith Covington's on here. It says he works with Common Ground. It's an award-winning land planning urban design firm. On and on. Randall Gross is telling you he offers development-related and strategic planning services, including.
Right.
And then he lists all these items.
Okay.
We did not ask for all of that.
But you did in your scope of work. In your scope of work,
No,
you are asking for, in here, under project kickoff and planning, one of the things that you have listed on here, and under scope 2, visioning and economic assessment and analysis. So what is the economic assessment and analysis that was done to support this plan so that the city has the resources to support that plan?
Right, so that's what Mary was explaining in those 2 appendix. That's the work that he performed for us. That met that task.
Economic development, baseline analysis.
Okay, I'm trying to be respectful here, but the difference between an economic development plan, okay, and a fiscal municipal economic analysis is completely different from an economic development plan. An economic development plan has to do with exactly what you've done here. What a fiscal and municipal, okay, analysis is if I'm going to go build all this out, how is the city itself and the impact to the existing homeowners, how is that going to impact our taxes? How is it going to impact county taxes? Okay, how is it going to impact most everything that we do within the city here? So what I'm asking is, you have a requirement and a scope of work that didn't get done.
So
in my opinion.
I think if I understand what you're saying, then can we put that in the form of a recommendation back to us that you feel like we should have had this municipal finance and fiscal impact analysis completed? Is that?
Yeah, that's
correct?
fine.
Okay.
There was last, and then I'll let someone else talk. The last question that I have related to this, there was an article in the newspaper that the Planning Commission itself, which has 7 members minus 1 right now, that you have already approved this plan. Is that correct? The Planning Commission. I'm not talking the mayor or the board of aldermen, but the Planning Commission itself. Internally, you voted and said, we approve this plan.
Well, not internally, in open public meeting. They met and they approved recommending this plan on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
That's what I'm asking.
Who did not. They voted the plan down and sent it back to Planning Commission to revise.
Okay.
So in effect, right now, it is still in a draft developing.
Okay, so my recommendation then, if you would write this down, is that we put any future planning on hold until we go back and look at the economic analysis, okay, to the city itself. Are our taxes going to increase? Are our county taxes going to increase? And what is the plan to have enough city employees to support all of this growth? And I'll just add one more respectful comment. As an example, you have a city engineer. That city engineer is outsourced. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you're trying to add another double the population in 20 years? And you don't have a city engineer?
We are not trying, we're not the catalyst or trying to create growth. This plan is looking out ahead for the next 20 years of Tullahoma, and we're just seeing the demand that's out there and trying to prepare, make sure that our infrastructure doesn't fall behind for what we think could happen, the potential that's out there.
Okay.
But yes, one of the reasons to do that is plan for all types of city services and make sure that we're adding staff and doing what we need to do to keep up.
And that's why I asked that would be, if you look at a public municipality financial analysis of the finances for the city, okay, that would drive you to say, I can no longer afford to pay to outsource city engineering work. But you don't know that now because the analysis wasn't done. Those are the things that I'm talking about. And when you look at that, it not only includes just the city as far as the executive part of the city, but how many more policemen are we going to have to hire? How many more firemen are we going to have to hire? How many more school crossing guards are we going to have to hire? Okay, that's what a fiscal impact analysis for a municipal planned expansion and zoning is. Thank you for your time.
That scope of work in Tullahoma is going to cost us $200,000.
Yeah.
The same scope of work in Murfreesboro, maybe $500,000.
The same scope of what?
Work. Same scope of work.
Okay.
In Murfreesboro, maybe $500,000.
Right.
Same scope of work in Nashville, maybe $5 million.
Right.
I don't know.
Okay.
You know, there's a difference in the degree of detail that actually comes out of a scope of work.
Right.
And so what we got is we got a $200,000 detail. Based on that scope of work, the planners, GWC, have given us what they requested. I was not in those meetings. What they requested, one-on-one after they were selected, based on the scope of work, what they wanted out of each one of the items within the scope of work. Okay. You're defining a certain item within the scope of work at a certain level of detail that maybe this scope of work is not required.
Well, that's why I asked the question, is this the same scope of work at the very first that you gave to the bidders, whoever they may be, 5, 6, or 7? Was this the same scope of work? And the answer was yes. So if it's the same scope of work, and it states in here that one of the requirements is to do fiscal analysis for this, based upon the growth for the city, then either they didn't meet the contractual requirement, or someone said, well, I guess we just don't need it, or we don't have the money to do it. Okay?
They were interviewed, and all the applicants were interviewed.
Right.
And I'm sure they went over the scope of work. Each one of those applicants.
Right.
What the applicants said they would do. Basically, you've got something in writing as to return after the selection.
Right. Right.
Okay. But the detail of that, and at the level of the contract amount, would be determined as you go along.
No, that's not.
There's no detail in that scope of work that says it has to be done a certain way.
Right. So because there's no detail in this scope of work, that's why you didn't get an economic analysis plan.
Well, they did in a couple of areas that they asked for.
Okay.
And got.
Okay. On your 200,000 for here and your 500,000 for Murfreesboro, you could have got it free from MTAS.
You said that yesterday.
Yeah, you could have got it free from MTAS, and that's what they do.
So what I'm thinking though is, just for the sake of everyone's time in this room, and I'm happy to have this conversation with you one-on-one if we can, but let's maybe try to get back. I know there's other people in the room that wanted to make comments on the plan.
I understand that, but respectfully, you ask for people's comments from the community, and if I sit and do it one-on-one with you, the other 40 people in this meeting have no idea what that discussion was about. And I'm not here to
I think it needs to be relevant to why we're here though, and we are here to get feedback on this draft plan. And
right.
So what you're discussing in my mind is you're wanting to talk about the contract and the scope of work that we had with the consultants and whether they fulfilled all their obligations or not. That's really outside of what we're here to discuss.
But what the Board of Mayor and Aldermen wanted these public meetings to do is to give an opportunity for the citizens to ask questions about the plan, about any part of the plan. And part of that is, how is this chosen? And yesterday, when we talked about this plan and things of, oh yeah, well, we know there's lots in this plan that aren't feasible. I think that those are, no, it's not a specific page that somebody is talking about, but I think there's general concerns that citizens have, and that was the purpose from my understanding of the motion that was made, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, was to allow there to be citizens to hear everyone's comments, and also for citizens to be able to ask any question they had about the plan, the process, what went into it, what's going to go on afterward. So,
So I made that motion, so I can tell you my intent on that motion. And my intent on that motion was to go through and tell us what it is that you do not like. I can't speak for the rest of us, but it was my motion, let me finish, was to go through and say, I don't want to just hear that, hey, I don't like the plan. I want to hear, I see an issue here with this, and then tell me what exactly that issue is, because I can't change, I just don't like the plan. I am okay with hearing, and I do want to hear questions about process, and I do want to hear some of that, but I also agree with what Ms. Moody said, is there's 40 other people in this room. So that is a question they'll have to come back to. You know, on your economic analysis, if they came to us on the board and said, we want a feasibility study, I'm gonna say, no, give me a plan first that gives me projections so that I'm not just arbitrarily picking numbers out of the sky. Because we can do it for 5,000% growth, or we can do it for 10,000 extra people. I wanna have a baseline so that I know, okay, we're projecting 2%, what's that gonna look like? And we don't have that until we have this plan. But my intent was, when I made the motion, was let's hear what you don't like and let's get that feedback and let's come back in and let's change those pieces as a group, but let everybody in here share the time equally and be respectful of everybody else's time.
Okay, well, I think a specific way to address it would be to say, we don't like that there's not been some economic feasibility in what the plan is recommending.
She took that recommendation and she's writing it down and she's gonna pass it on to us. So she's done
He's
that.
asking that a municipal finance and fiscal impact analysis ought to be considered to understand the impact of city taxes, city employees, etc. And also you requested that all planning be put on hold until this analysis is complete. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, and I think
So
what's pertinent here, when you say you want the community's input, what I am looking at is, I understand the plan, and I understand what you're trying to do, and I'm not saying that it's bad. What I'm saying is that the steps to get from A to Z, okay, you can't skip F, G, and H and say that Z is good. I mean, it's no different than if I'm going to build my own house. I mean, it doesn't do me any good to go buy 3 acres of waterfront property and then put a whole bunch of plans together for a 4,000 square foot house. And then at the very end, once I paid to have that all done, I go, well, geez, I can't afford a $3 million house. That's what I'm saying. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'll let other people ask questions.
In light of what he's talking about here, I would ask the Planning Commission to, before you send this back to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, that an economic impact analysis is completed.
Right.
Before this ever goes back for a vote at the Board of Mayor and Alderman. Yeah. They need to know what it is, what the long-term impact is going to be on the city before we approve this. That's my recommendation.
I guess the one thing that I would say, I'm not disagreeing with your point at all, and we will write that recommendation down, but we as a staff or even as a plan, just because we have tried to look at the horizon and see what's coming is not the same thing as making it happen. We're not all powerful in making thousands of people move to Tullahoma. I guess I just want to make sure that that's understood, that what's in this plan is not preordained going to happen.
I understand that totally.
Okay.
A little bit of history. The airport, everything that's been going on in the airport for the last 10 years. Put together a plan. We looked at the economic impact for the city, because it was going to cost the city some money, but what the potential would be. And then the Board of Mayor and Alderman said, we like that, go ahead with your plan. Okay, that was not the planning and codes, that was the airport authority. So it can be done, but we need to give the leadership some idea of what it's going to cost.
Yes.
And I agree with you that it shouldn't be, but we'll consider it. It's got to be a requirement to be done before it goes to the board and aldermen. Otherwise, you might as well just throw the statement of work out and throw out their capabilities statement and start over.
Could you tell me your name?
John Miller. You and I have had conversations before on flooding issues.
Yes, we have.
All of the local road.
Yes.
Sir, what was your comment?
Does this meeting have anything to do with zones or codes?
What was your question? We'll see.
Well, I have been trying, I bought a piece of property, and when I bought it 6 years ago, my intention was moving the mobile home out and putting another one in. All right, I have been flip-flopped around for all this time. When I bought it, it was zoned residential. All right, when I went to move and put another mobile home where this very old one is, okay, it went to commercial. Okay, I went to a realtor that had it sold commercial, and then he told me it was rezoned industrial. I know you remember me.
Yeah, I remember you.
And then the last time I talked to you, you told me it couldn't even be zoned industrial. Now this has been going on for over 3 years. You know, and it took me a lot of time, and I've lost money just trying to improve my property. And I thought that's what we were here to talk about. And I would like to know how I can get it zoned what it was when I bought it and put another mobile home on it. But then you tell me I can't put but a double wide on it. All right, I've talked to the mayor, I've talked to you, and he said I wanted to put a 16-foot wide on it. He says, I don't see a problem with that, go down and talk to Mary. Well, I talked to you, and that day we did not find, that's when we found out it was zoned industrial. All right, I talked to you on the phone recently, and you said there was a hold on everything. It is zoned nothing right now. So what am I to do? Am I to leave this black eye out on the Old Estill Springs Road? Why won't Tullahoma let me improve my property? I mean, it ain't like it's been going on a week. This has been going on a long time.
Okay, so this is kind of this is kind of outside the realm of the comprehensive plan. But just for everybody's...
I didn't know what our meeting was about, but I need answers. I'm tired of waiting.
Okay.
What I live in is falling apart.
I'll explain it. I'm going to explain it.
I can't even have any company over.
I'll explain it for everybody in this room. You have a single wide mobile home that's on Old Estill Springs Road that you put, when was it, the 70s, 80s?
72.
Right. At that time, the property was zoned residential. Over time, I'm not sure exactly when it happened, the Tullahoma Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted to change the zoning map, and they made your property industrial.
All right, it had to happen after 2016 when I bought it, because it was zoned residential when I bought it.
Right, so before I got here, the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted to have your property and all the property that is along your side of the road, all those trailers and houses, they zoned them industrial. So because your property is zoned industrial, a single-family house is a grandfathered use. It's a non-conforming use. Let me finish, please. You asked me some questions, and I'm trying to answer them. So the current code, your single-wide mobile home is a grandfathered use because industrial uses aren't allowed in residential uses are not permitted use in industrial zone. So, similarly, the city of Tullahoma has adopted codes through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission that you can only have single-wide mobile homes and mobile home parks now. You cannot put a single-wide mobile home on its individual piece of property. You cannot remove a single-wide mobile home and replace it with a new single-wide mobile home. You can remove an old single-wide mobile home on an individual lot, but you have to replace it with either a double-wide mobile home or a stick-built house. So you and I had discussed, you had explained your concerns to me when I first started working here almost 2 years ago, and I've tried to help you, and I explained that we're going through the comprehensive planning process And we are looking at changing the maps for the plan. You and I had discussed the option, would you like the property to be residential or would you like the property to be commercial? You had indicated to me that you would be interested in having that property commercial because you thought it would be easier for you to sell that property. I took the map and went to the planning commission, the steering committee and the planning commission, and we've designated your property and property along your intersection there that you live on Parham and East Old Estill Springs as a little commercial node for some neighborhood serving commercial uses. Unfortunately, I have not been able, I thought the plan would have been adopted by now, and I would have worked with you on trying to get the property rezoned to commercial so you'd be able to sell it. Unfortunately, I can't get the plan at this point approved before the board of mayor and aldermen. We're having to revise the plan again, so that is resulting in your delay.
All right, when I talked to you in person, you told me that property could not be zoned industrial because it was in a floodplain. So how can you zone it industrial when your code says that you cannot build an industry in a floodplain? Now, you told me that yourself. You said that, and that's when you asked me if I wanted it residential or commercial. No, I can't get it residential if I can't put a home in there that I can afford. What would a one person need with a double wide trailer? I see trailers all over town with 2 trailers on a lot, 2 on a lot, 2 on a lot, that are older model trailers. All I want to do is make my place better. I love where I live, but Tullahoma is pushing me off of it. Now, what is it zoned right now? Can you tell me? Nothing?
No, sir, it's still zoned industrial.
Now, you're contradicting yourself. You tell me it can't be zoned industrial because it's in a floodplain.
I did not tell you it can't be.
Yes, ma'am, you did.
Okay.
I would not sit here and say that and you not tell me that if you did not say that it cannot be zoned industrial. Because you told me to wait 2 months, that y'all were doing probably this right here. You were replanning. You said, call me back in 2 months and we'll see where we're at. That's where me and you got in a conversation about it being commercial or residential because it couldn't be zoned industrial. It's 1.7 acres. It ain't big enough for an industry. And it's in a flood zone.
Right.
So either you're not being straight up with me, you're telling me one thing and doing another, and then coming back and telling me another thing. I'm ready to go to my congressman up at the house and find out why Tullahoma can't get this straightened out over so long a period of time. I just want a place to live where I can live the rest of my life out and not have to worry about the roof falling in or, you know, this, that, and the other. I've already had to spend so much money on little things and it ain't getting no better. You know, I can't even have company over my house. Now what do I do? You answer my question. What do I do? I've been to you, I've been to the mayor. The mayor sends me to you. I don't know what to do. I'm at wit's end over this.
It sounds like you have a few options, but they might not be options that you like. So one of the things that Mary was saying is that your residence is grandfathered in. So you can stay in the residence you're in, you can make improvements to the building that you're in.
They won't nobody work on it. I have called many people out there and they said, you know, this is, we can't do it.
Right, and then unfortunately, Mary is limited by what is in our municipal code. And what she's telling you is it doesn't allow for what you would like to do, which is removing that single wide and putting a new single wide. It doesn't allow that. So the option is fixing the one that you have, or considering, and I understand you're saying it's not affordable for you, but she was saying considering another construction type or a double wide could go back. And then another option would be if you found another place to live and rezone this property to commercial and try to sell it as
All right,
commercial.
well, let me fall back on that. All right, I did, she told me that she has rezoned it commercial. I went and got a realtor. A realtor had a buyer for it, ready to buy it. And then when he went to the code department, that's when they had rezoned it again to industrial. It's like they're flipping me over and over. They do not want me to leave that property. Now, and then she tells me it's industrial. It can't be industrial, it's in a flood zone. We'll take care of that. And I cannot believe you did not remember telling me that in your office right down here.
Sir, I think what you might be mistaken is the difference between the zoning map and the plan map. There's two different maps that we're dealing with right now. So we're in the process of updating the plan map, and I agreed with you to change the plan map of what the property could be zoned to commercial. The zoning map is a different thing. The zoning map has not changed. Your property has been zoned industrial and is industrial now. So there's two different maps. The only map that we've been revising lately is the plan map, which through discussions with you and trying to assist you in your predicament, I said yes, under the current plan map that is, I believe, in front of you, it's industrial. However, that whole area is in floodplain, and I did say yes, that's probably not the best place to have an industrial piece of property.
You told me it could not be zoned industrial. That you didn't know how it got to be zoned industrial. From commercial to industrial.
Right, I told you I don't know when that occurred.
So can I get this zone back to commercial? Because there's no way that I can afford to put a double wide there.
Okay.
And it would be not feasible for me to even put a double wide there with me living by myself.
Yes.
And I could buy another place in Tullahoma.
Okay. I believe the last time I spoke, but again, you're more than welcome. You can come in and apply for rezoning to go to a commercial zoning district. And we can take that to the Planning Commission and Board of Mayor and Aldermen for consideration.
And how long may I look forward to this taking?
Right, unfortunately, it takes approximately 3 months.
So I need to come talk to you about filling out paperwork to get it rezoned.
Correct.
I don't understand this city. I will move out of it if I sell it.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Burke?
No, let's just keep going. It's fine.
Well, let's hear from Ms. Burke.
I will follow on just a moment. This seems to me a perfect example of the zoning problem that we would have in the future. And the main issue has been the protection of our property, which the government is supposed to be on our side and protect it. I just see already what's been started as an avenue to changing almost a type of government. And we need to be able to keep the zoning and called zoning and the rezoning process, where at least we have had some participation in the community.
I agree with you, Ms. Berg. I think it is his situation is a good example of what types of issues we were seeing with the map that we have today, and what initiated both the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen wanting us to pursue a new plan and a new map, because we were frequently seeing what should be rare. Rezoning should be very rare, but we were seeing multiple rezonings every single month at Planning Commission. And very often, it seems to me, it's been existing residential areas that had been rezoned at some time in the past, some in 1999, some in the early 2000s. And I think some of those were through citywide rezonings that, you're right, had much less public notice than is typically required of rezonings. And so these areas of existing residential were rezoned commercial or industrial without those property owners getting notice of it. And so we've been dealing as a staff and as the boards, we've been dealing with kind of cleaning up or trying to find ways around to help people, because we feel like the existing zoning map is really bad. It doesn't represent good planning practices, and it did not preserve the rights of those existing people to be able to continue the use of their property.
That woman, I just, sorry, I pointed you out. No, I'm pointing at you. No, the woman next to you. She's like, no, you. I just spoke to this woman this morning where she lives off of Maplewood, and I showed her on the 2012 plan that they had her neighborhood designated for high-density residential. So that the thought under the 2012 plan is presumed that somebody that would allow for a developer to come in, remove all those houses in that existing neighborhood to be replaced with apartments or townhomes. Under the current plan, that entire neighborhood is now under the traditional neighborhood existing, which only allows for single-family houses. So that new plan, as an example, the Planning Commission and the Steering Committee, we try to go through efforts of ensuring that this new plan and then matches the existing development pattern of the city, not trying to necessarily convert over existing neighborhoods into apartments, converting over existing neighborhoods into industrial uses. And then as a segue, a lot of people are concerned about like this, the new zoning maps coming out and what the zoning that I've been working on and the rezoning properties. The new zoning maps that would come out, and again, go through the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, it is an attempt to correct some of the zoning problems that we see. So doing a rezoning of neighborhoods based on the new plan. Okay, we have the new plan adopted. Maplewood subdivision is supposed to stay single-family residential, is now in a single-family residential place type. Let's not change the zoning. It's currently zoned R3 now. Let's change the zoning back to R1.
So is this what you're talking about, conforming and non-conforming properties?
Yes. So there are a lot of properties that are non-conforming. And again, I'm trying to be as transparent and as open with everybody at this point as I can be. When I first got here, I'm driving around town, I'm looking at the zoning map, and I'm looking at, and it's not matching. We have a geographic information system, which is a computer system. I've got a layer that shows existing uses. So it says what every property has, a duplex, a house. Then you look at the plan map, and you look at the zoning map. Theoretically, for the most part, those should all match. They do not match at all in Tullahoma. So there are whole existing neighborhoods, and I can show you examples, entire blocks of houses that they've been houses for 80 years in established neighborhoods, but they're in a commercial land use category or in a commercial zoning district. So if somebody comes in and wants to add an addition to their house, I have to tell them no. We deal with that every day. So this new plan, as an aside, we've been talking a lot about the TNN and the growth, but for the existing residents of Tullahoma, this plan has gone through great efforts, and I've gone through block by block, row, subdivision by subdivision, trying to find them, trying to kind of correct that issue with allowing these historic existing neighborhoods in town to remain single-family residential and not feel the pressure of being converted over to apartments and duplexes. Similarly, there's not a housing market for that. We've seen the housing analysis, again, that you can please refer to in the plan, shows that there's a high demand for housing, but there's a very low supply because there doesn't appear to be a market for a developer to come in and demolish a block's worth of houses to build their apartments or duplexes. That just isn't occurring. So there is apparently a need for, that was the approach of the last plan. It didn't work, so now we can try to find what's another solution to try to meet the demand in the interest of having some additional duplexes, townhomes, and apartments. One of the options that, again, in life, when you have problems, sometimes there's more than one right answer. The consultants thought, okay, well, another approach to try to find properties for duplexes, townhomes, and apartments would be this traditional neighborhood new. Maybe we can put little pockets in them on the undeveloped land in single-family areas. I'm hearing that that's not an option that the city is willing to entertain, and that's fine. Let's find another option. Where do we think these apartment townhomes and duplexes should occur? I'm sorry, I kind of ranted a little bit, but sorry I pointed you out like that, but I just want to use you as an example.
Questions over here.
Yes.
Oh, I have
I'm sorry,
a question. What would prevent that person from putting in a RV and living in the RV?
The city code does not allow people to live in RVs on their property, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. There you answered the question.
Yeah,
So-
that's not, you
But what
cannot,
happens if-
well, you can, let me rephrase that. An RV is considered a mobile structure, same way is, like an RV and a mobile home, for zoning purposes, are considered the same type of residential structure.
Oh.
You can live in a trailer, RV, single wide mobile home, but they have to be in mobile home parks as of today.
Oh, so.
So you theoretically,
he
you
could
could pull
live
an
there.
RV into a mobile home park.
Yeah, in other words, he
Yeah.
could say, well, I'm just in here temporarily. And
No, you can't temporarily live in an RV.
Oh, okay.
No, you cannot. It doesn't mean
But you see
zoning
a
law.
lot of it done, I don't see any of it done really in Tullahoma, but drive to Murfreesboro or Nashville and look on the side.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot of people living in RVs.
I have a question.
Yeah. I'm sorry, ma'am.
You keep talking about all this new residential,
Uh-huh.
but you don't say anything about how those people that are gonna live there are gonna get out of their neighborhood. What I'm understanding, the traffic goes through Terra Estates, which puts it on Short Springs or whichever country club, whatever that street is. And that street's not wide enough to carry eventually 500 to 1,000 cars. And it's going through another residential area instead of to another main street. How do you explain that one?
So I think again,
You
so I think one thing to understand about the plan is, again, this is a big overarching plan where they forecasted that there will potentially be development of new homes in Tullahoma, but it's not specific down to a particular parcel. So there's two issues that are coming together. There is a new owner of this large acreage property that has talked about a concept for developing it.
Right.
That's just something that happens every day. People come into Mary's office and talk about different land development. The plan and what this is meant to do, it didn't locate any, it doesn't have that kind of specific information.
Well, from what I've been seeing is that y'all have already decided that this property, these people have bought the property in behind Terra Estates and making mess. How do those people get out of that neighborhood?
So
Through
as of
Terra
right
Estates and
now,
Manor?
we don't have any actual submittal of a plan, a proposal to develop it or anything.
Is roads taking, streets, is the plan, is streets in the plan, put it that way?
Yes, but again, at this very high level.
Oh,
When
now
a
they
specific
just-
property you know, they'll have to submit a site plan and a proposal for development, and we'll look at that specifically. And you're right, if the roads cannot handle it.
I think what we're seeing is that it's misleading, that it is showing clearly that there are people that are going to be able to come from that new property from Anderson Farms through Terra Estates and somewhere else.
It's not in this plan, no.
The maps I've seen have the roads.
Let me
so
explain this to you. No, let me explain this. There was a concept plan submitted by the property owners for what they were thinking of developing on the Anderson farm. And I've explained this to other people in the room. They brought that concept to the Development Advisory Committee, which is like all the staff members that review infrastructure and improvements. We told them, we gave them pages and pages of things that we found that we were concerned about and that didn't meet our code. We told them, go back to the drawing board, come up with a new plan, and then formally submit that subdivision plan through the plan unit development process for consideration. Part of the things that we asked for is you have, the main thing that we asked for hydrology study, tree inventory, this, that, and the other, including a traffic study. So we need to see how they're proposing all the traffic to flow within the subdivision and outside of the subdivision. And the city can control where that traffic goes. The developers have not come back with a new plan yet. They have not officially submitted anything.
So is that...
So that map, that Anderson Farm drawing that keeps getting circulated all around town was only a concept plan of what that property owner was thinking of doing. That plan has not received any city approval whatsoever. It has not been reviewed against any city codes yet whatsoever. That was just, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. And again, we gave them pages and pages of comments, concerns, and issues saying, this doesn't meet code, that's not good, this isn't gonna work.
So all that you're talking about, is that done then before it's rezoned from the agriculture plan?
Yes, in order for them to, when they apply for a planned unit development for that project, they're required to submit a layout of the property, a traffic study, a hydrology study, a tree inventory, 2-foot contours. They have to do a capacity analysis through TUA for sewer and water. They're also going to have to work with the fire department for access. So yes, we gave them a long list, which is all part of public record, of additional data that they're required to submit when they apply, that all of staff will review.
Can they do that in the existing zoning as it is today? With all those submittals, subject to those submittals?
They're only zoned agricultural now, so they're only allowed to do a 5-acre minimum lot size subdivisions.
But if the plan didn't pass, they could still request R1.
Yes.
They can still go, even if this passes or not.
If we're not even here today, and we're under the 2012 plan, the Anderson Farm property is in a low-density residential zoning district. So that allows for consideration of that agriculturally zoned land as of today. It allows consideration for that property owner to request a rezoning to R1. And then we would look at the plan and go, okay, they're requesting this property to be rezoned to R1. Let's look at the plan. The 2012 land use map has that as low-density residential, which is the land use category that supports the city saying, we want this property. Our vision for the future of this property is for it to be low-density residential development. The way you facilitate that is through the R1 zoning district. So it would be appropriate to zone it to R1 if we're only looking at that, just the land use map. We also look at other conditions. And then once they're zoned to R1, then they could come in with just a standard subdivision.
And that would be nominally 12,000 square feet.
12,000 square foot minimum lot size.
Minimum lot size over the whole area.
Correct.
And if we look at Kings Ridge as an example, that includes condominiums, high-density condominiums, and large estate lots. So they can do what they want to do with the existing zoning.
No, the existing zoning is agricultural.
If they were to be rezoned, they could do that.
Maybe I'm saying the wrong word.
Okay, well, you gotta watch your words.
Mary, is your understanding or your thought, what is the difference between, and I know what a planned unit development is, are these planned unit developments, are they gonna be required to have a homeowners association?
It depends.
It depends on what?
It depends on the type of improvements that the planned unit development would have. So if a planned unit development were to come in, and I'm not trying to be evasive, sir. I know. These aren't yes and no answers and questions. If a planned unit development were to come in and they lay out the roads and they want to dedicate the roads to the city, so you don't need an HOA for that. They're not going to have any parks or greenways or a clubhouse or anything, so you don't need an HOA for that. The only thing that they might be required to have an HOA for is if they put if they are required to have stormwater and detention pond improvements, those might be in common areas that a HOA would be required to maintain. So maybe. It depends on how the property owner lays out the subdivision.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that, and this is, I think, maybe something that can be taken up within the city itself. Emerald Meadows is a PUD and an HOA, okay? However, when the market dropped and the houses couldn't sell, and eventually they sold all of these lots to the developer from Murfreesboro, they took out the homeowners association requirement. So half of the people in there, okay, are not aware that it was designed with a homeowners association requirement. That's the way that development was made.
Right.
Okay.
And I believe that that's already a civil court matter with the developer at this point. I believe that, right.
No, but I'm asking though is that the city has a homeowners association document. I don't know if it's an ordinance, I believe it's an ordinance, okay? So my question would be, if that happened, I just happen to live in there, but if it happened in another area, okay, why is the city not enforcing the homeowners association ordinance that is on record for that particular PUD? And that relates to how are you going to do that for all of this? If somebody comes in and says, I want to do a PUD, and I want to put some greenways in there, and as in Emerald Meadows, there's stormwater problems there.
Okay.
Okay, so my question is, and that goes back again to this economic analysis, okay, of why does the city not enforce its ordinance within homeowners associations? They're not doing it.
Okay, so there are several different issues. Emerald Meadows is not a planned unit development, it's zoned just R1. That did not come through as a planned unit development.
Okay.
So that is just a standard subdivision.
Okay.
So covenants or restrictions that are created as part of a subdivision approval that are initially under the authority of the developer and then transferred to the homeowners association are outside the realm of the authority of the zoning, the local zoning authority. Those are typically, ask me a question, please, let me finish. So typically you have a layer of property rights for zoning, and then a developer and an HOA can have additional regulations.
Right.
For how, the type of houses, or whether or not you can have farm animals, and how the maintenance of the infrastructure within those common areas occur.
Okay.
So how the maintenance of, say, detention features in the common areas is under the authority of the HOA to enforce,
right,
not the city.
Right.
And as an aside note, when you're talking about planned unit developments, when a planned unit development is approved, you don't really have the conditions and the phasing and how the houses have to look and whatever is agreed upon as part of the negotiation between the city and the developer. All those notes are actually placed on the plat or the
Right.
site plan for the planned unit development that is approved, and then that is enforced by the city. So
Okay.
the city can go in and say, hey, look, you're supposed to be maintaining this open space. When a building permit comes in, we look at the notes on the planned unit development site plan and said, hey, it was agreed upon that all houses in this phase have to be at least 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
I can enforce that. But if it is in a regular standard subdivision and there's an HOA document, and I get this all the time.
Right.
People say, my HOA document says that I have a 50-foot setback, but the zoning says 25 feet. I say, for zoning purposes, and when I do my review, I'm just checking for the 25 feet. The HOA in the subdivision can be further restrictive. So if somebody were to build their house at 25 feet, it's not a violation of the city and the zoning code, it would be a violation of the HOA agreements, and that would be enforced by the HOA themselves and their attorney.
Okay, so my question though is, the city has a homeowner association ordinance, okay? If the developer, okay, doesn't meet the requirements of that homeowners
Not that I'm aware,
association
I'm not,
ordinance.
I'm not clear what he's referring to.
What's that?
I don't believe there's a homeowners association ordinance.
There is, it's 1283.
I don't know. If somebody wants to look that up for me.
We will.
I'm not sure if it's exactly 1283, but I know 1283 is
So,
in there.
That's
Probably 45 minutes ago, a question about this.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to, I'm trying to keep control of the meeting. I'm sorry.
Were you calling on me?
Yes, I'm calling on you. I'm sorry, I forgot if I didn't answer a question over here.
Well, she brought up the issue of housing supply and controlling the supply of housing based on the projected population growth. And I want to caution you about trying to create that perfect fit to accommodate the specific population growth that's projected in the plan and or prepared by UT's Bureau of Economic Research Office. Is that you, at best you want to provide at least a supply 3 times what your projected growth rate is within the study period. Because otherwise you're going to really drive up housing costs. And that's going to really create a big problem for you, worse than you have now. Affordable housing is not nearly as bad in Tullahoma as it is in Metro Nashville. It's coming and it's getting worse. Yeah, just in the last year, inflation's outstripping the cost of housing to make it affordable. So it's getting worse. It's a lot worse in Nashville. Look at what's going on there. The problem with this, maybe this, just by looking at it and being familiar with the community, is that you're not accommodating the market, what's happening in the real world.
Right.
And you don't want to, apparently. There's an oversupply of low-density residential land use and or accompanying R1 zoning. You don't need any more of that. You got plenty of that to accommodate the growth. The problem is people can't afford that. So it just doesn't work that way. The reality of capitalism doesn't work for this model. So what you need to do probably is identify those areas, whether they're redevelopment areas in the older parts of town, which that creates some conflict as well, or some of these greenfields that is controversial here, in accommodating mixture of housing uses. That's where it's going, folks. Sorry, it's not. We don't live in acre and 2 acre lots with 5,000 square foot 2-story brick houses. That model's gone. There's still a little bit of a market like that, but there's not like it was 50 years ago. That's not working anymore. You're not going to get young people that way, I can tell you that much.
Right. And I appreciate you making those comments as another planner. Yes, so this has been an ongoing issue here in Tullahoma. They tried in the 2012 plan, okay, we'll try to guide the market for these different housing types to the existing neighborhoods. That obviously has not worked. We completed a housing study, and I can't remember, we haven't had a new apartment building constructed in 15 years. And the market analysis says it's woefully, we're undersupplied for that. So again, as I kind of philosophized, you have a problem, there's multiple answers. One answer was trying to, okay, we'll put the R3 zoning district and the high density residential in older existing neighborhoods. And I'm aware of the issues with that. That obviously didn't work because we still have a huge supply issue. So now the planners, the consultant firm said, okay, we'll try doing a mixed use product and try to capture greenfields, like you just said, to try to capture that market. This community, from what I'm hearing, at least the people in this room or the people recently that have become engaged in this process, don't have a desire to pursue that option as well. So now I'm asking, what's another option? To where can we try to meet the request, the demand for this type of housing market, and beyond the demand, the request that a lot of residents of Tullahoma have said, people that currently live in Tullahoma and want to stay in Tullahoma, but they want a nicer place to live, but they can't afford to buy a house. So that's kind of where we're at now, where I'm trying to find recommendations from the public about how to bridge that gap. Hi, Jen. How are you?
He hit the nail right on the head, and I attended all the Dream Tullahoma meetings and suggested mixed-use developments in creative places. For example, where you have dead zones, and I think I mentioned this before, think creatively, like for example, there's a dead zone where Ollie's is. And over to the side there's huge parking availability that it might seem crazy, but you could put an apartment building in there. You know, it's making use of a dead zone where there is already available parking and the infrastructure can support people driving in and out of there, and it would make walkability, you know, more of a thing where, you know, maybe there could be a laundromat there, people can walk to downtown.
I've thought that myself,
those ways.
Yeah, I've thought that, Ms. Wendell. And one thing that I can say that this plan does address, currently under the C2 zoning district, you cannot have residential units in the commercial districts. But under the plan that's drafted now, under the suburban corridor, it's recommended limited residential development in those areas. So that would open up a possibility of doing townhomes and apartments and duplexes in existing commercial areas. There's significant you can do the research yourself. There are properties on South Jackson, and there are very large properties on the far end of North Jackson, tens of acres, and those properties have been for sale for years.
Right.
And they're zoned commercial, and there apparently is no interest to expand the commercial strip that far north. If this plan was approved and we allowed, opened up the C2 zoning district to allow for apartments and townhomes and duplexes, that would open up those green fields to do that housing demand.
Yeah,
but then on the other hand, you got to look at, we'd be losing potential commercial inventory. So there's a balancing act there as well.
Another suggestion, I don't know if I mentioned it here, but it really would take like a deep pocket developer. But I was even thinking of approaching whoever developed Parkview to look at one of the main thoroughfares into Tullahoma, which is North Jackson Street coming in from 41A up until Lincoln. And that has been an eyesore for, the past 30 years. But a deep pocket developer, I thought, wouldn't it be nice if that strip mall that takes up a huge block, really huge, if it were like an upstairs, downstairs thing, like you find in European cities, major cities, upstairs have residential and downstairs have commercial. And if you look at the back of that block, there's so much space there. Yeah. You could even have nice condominiums with a pool house and a clubhouse in the back there, but plenty of parking.
I agree.
So that's an eyesore that really should be addressed. But there are creative solutions. You just need interested developers.
And they did talk. We haven't these people in these groups. We haven't really talked about it, but that is another option that the consultants came up with to try to meet the supply of these alternative housing types. They're recommending housing developments in your downtown area as well, where and along the corridors where you would have like Lincoln Street, there are businesses on the first floor, and then I don't know what's going up on those second stories. I think there's storage, maybe some people are living up there, but there's a huge opportunity where those could all be apartments.
You just have to have sufficient
And
parking.
then Lauderdale and Warren, of those properties could be redeveloped, or those properties, if it meets building code, obviously, they could certainly, all those existing buildings could add second stories to all those existing buildings and have those all as rentals and or condos.
And that's really what
To help meet
Tullahoma
that
has been
supply.
voting for the past
Yeah,
30
there's-
years.
And it's interesting because under the current code, under the current C-Win zoning district, you're allowed to live on second and third stories above retail and office uses, but just people aren't taking advantage of that option.
Is there a maximum building height in Tullahoma?
Yeah, the maximum building heights go by the individual zoning districts.
And it's about 4 stories. Is the
4
max.
stories is the max, I think, and that's in the industrial zone and I think in the R3 zone.
Like where
What's the veranda apartments, what zone is that?
Veranda C1,
Commercial
downtown.
one?
Yeah, downtown.
And I think it's 3-story.
It is
Yeah,
3
but
stories.
But it's residential apartments, right?
Uh-huh. So that's grandfathered.
That's what I said a long time ago.
That's grandfathered. Yep.
So, right near that is the old Tullahoma post office. It's owned by the state.
Uh-huh.
Okay, is there any in this plan to do anything with that? It's been for sale for 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have brought it to the city twice about when you wanted to do the new police station, why couldn't you take that land and just buy it? Because under Tennessee law, the only people that can buy it is a municipality. A private developer can't buy that. So it's been sitting there vacant for 10 or 15 years, which you could take and redesignate or whatever you need. Okay, there's probably enough room there to put 10 apartments in there.
Are you talking about the First Christian Church annex?
I think it must be the state employment office.
The state building behind that.
The old employment office.
Oh, the employment.
Lincoln and,
Oh, you said post office.
he did.
Yeah, I'm talking the old, behind that.
It's
So there's
on
an
Lincoln
opportunity
and,
there for the city to invest that money and then find a developer to develop it and put in 20 or 30 apartments.
We've had some new people that have joined us and we're already past 1 o'clock and we're ending this event at 2. Do any of the new people that have joined who haven't spoken yet have any comments?
Tom's had his hand up several times.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. Okay.
Is your hand still up? No, good.
I'm sorry. I'm not purposely trying to ignore anybody. It's just, I'm trying to guide the good
I
discussion.
just have a
Maureen,
question.
yes.
About the place types, so I guess what I'm hearing is we have all these, kind of detailed ideas, I would say, that are being discussed right now. And I don't disagree, I think that's a good idea, because if you did the downtown housing, then you could have the city within the city. I mean, that is the city, that is our city. We don't need to move our city elsewhere, so that emphasizes our city. I think that's a great idea. But I guess what I'm hearing is on this, the current zoning is that we maybe can't do some of those things, and that's why you want to move to the place types?
No.
Okay.
The plan is, under the current zoning, you cannot have apartments in the C2 zoning district. So the plan is saying they've created a new place type for those commercial corridors. And they're saying in the plan, we recommend that you change the zoning district to allow for consideration of apartments in your commercial zoning. Did that answer your question?
Sort of. Okay, so the thing that maybe I have a concern about with the place types is who has the authority to control that zoning in there. I guess it feels maybe like the citizens might lose the say in that zoning if it moves to a place type. So I guess that's the question is, if it's a place type, I keep hearing there's some flexibility in the zoning agreements with the developers. But I guess I wonder who has the authority then to make those decisions?
So the plan is the place types map, which is the guiding document for land development. And then there's the zoning district, which is the actual law and regulations to implement that plan. Then I think that what I think I hear you saying is that you're asking about the zoning district of a planned unit development and who has the authority to do that negotiation about what those improvements are. So yeah, so long story short, with a planned unit development, the developer comes in with their proposal of what they're proposing to develop, and then the city can discuss what improvements we would like to see, the city being the city government as well as the residents. So the planned unit development goes through a public hearing at the Planning Commission and 2 public hearings at the Board of Mayor and Aldermen where public input can be provided. So if a planned unit development, and then it's all public record, so the citizens, once a planned unit development is applied for, citizens can come in and look at their plan and start giving me their input at that time. So you can go, the planned unit development's on the agenda before the Planning Commission, the public can show up and say, hey, with this planned unit development, they're saying, they're not saying anything about the type of housing. We would like a condition put on this planned unit development that the houses have to be at least 15,000 square feet. And then once it's adopted as part of the planned development, then that is able to be enforced by the city.
So who votes on that?
The Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen vote on the approval of the planned unit development.
So both have to approve it?
Correct, because it's a zoning change and it's an ordinance. Yes. Yeah.
Back to the percentage of growth, just to say, I don't think a lot of people are against growth here. I think we just want to make sure it's controlled. It is not overwhelming to our infrastructure, that it goes at a pace that everything can move along smoothly. I don't think people are against mixed housing use. I think they are concerned when it all dumps out into one area, which makes the streets just like our congested streets we have. So that's the concern there. I think a lot of people do want growth here. I did have a question about on page 46, the annexation. It talks about 3 acres. So whenever, I guess I've listened to the May 31st Planning Commission meeting, and I've gotten some information in my head. So if you're annexing and it's 3 acres, what are you changing that to? Is it 2 acres, 1 acre, half an acre? I guess I'm kind of confused on if you annex property in and how that works.
Yeah, I'm following you. I'm trying to frame my answer.
Or is that determined if you have
one? No, I got you. I'm trying to frame my answer so you can explain. There's kind of 2 separate issues here. Originally, the consultants had that all the area that's in the urban growth boundary that is eligible for annexation would automatically be in the rural place type with a 3-acre minimum lot size. Upon review of that direction with the steering committee and the planning commission, it was determined that really when property owners are coming in to request an annexation, they're usually requesting annexation for a specific project. And not all people that are requesting to be annexed are wanting to do. You don't ask to be annexed to be on city sewers if you're doing a 3-acre minimum lot size subdivision. You can do that on septic. Nor theoretically, there's property on I don't know, South Jackson, and it's a company that wants to manufacture cowboy hats, and they need sewer capacity. You obviously wouldn't annex property into the city and then you get placed automatically into this rural residential place type. So the Planning Commission, at my recommendation, said that when individuals come in to be annexed, what place type they're voted and put in is done on a case-by-case basis based on what they're proposing to do, as well as the character of the surrounding area.
Okay, that was what I was trying to get to, that I was hoping.
So then the other part of that was that under the current version of the place type maps, there are no areas that are in the rural area designation. But that might change. Some of the feedback we heard a couple hours ago is maybe looking at the agricultural zone land being placed in this rural areas. It was changed from, the consultants had a 3-acre minimum lot size per subdivision lot, and it was changed, I can't remember if the steering committee or the planning commission, it was reduced down to 2. I think now that I'm remembering, it was to try to match it with the R1A zoning district, which has a 2-acre minimum lot size. So then the thought was that if a property was designated in the rural area place type on the place type map in the comp plan, then we would change the zoning map and zone that property to the R1A that had the 2-acre minimum lot size, and everything would fit in cleanly.
And I understand the mixed use area. I mean, part of that is it costs the city more to maintain. The
spread everything out.
Right. It's better if everything's closer together, so it's less costly in some areas of that. So I get that. As far as the gentleman that was talking about having a plan for, how we get money, how we manage this, and knowing up front, I agree with him. I mean, you could have surcharges on incomes that will help fund that money for things. You could increase taxes, increase the tax base, makes for those things. But I think it's important to go into any plan that you're doing, kind of knowing, and I know this is a 20-year plan, but you've got to have things that you're starting with up front, that you plan on doing up front, and how much does that cost? Now, I know that will be evolving as time goes by, as everything goes up, and depending upon the market and what comes in here. But I think it would make people feel better to have that plan, that financial plan on this, because that's a lot of concern for the people in town, the citizens of Tullahoma. Are their taxes going to be raised? How's that going to affect them? Are there surcharges on income? So I agree with the gentleman in knowing what you're going to spend up front. I do have a question on the mixed-use property, like in the Anderson Farms. I know you said that we're not going to do it commercial, but does that mean that there's land left for commercial to do later? Or when you do a plan on mixed-use plans, if it's not going to have commercial at that time, will it never have commercial in it?
Under the, go to that section so I'm not misquoting myself. The mixed use category says that, I think it allows for consideration of up to 10%.
Right, it's 10% commercial.
10% non-residential. We specifically use the word non-residential, so it's not just commercial. It can be like an office use or something as well. So when a plan development is approved, they don't have to do a commercial component, but once a plan development is approved, 5 years could go by, a year can go by, and those property owners within the subdivision can all apply to amend their plan development. They have that right. It's very tricky at that point. Once a bunch of lots start getting developed, everybody in that subdivision has to sign off on those applications. So it's logistically it's harder to do to amend a PD once it's almost built out. But yeah, there's always an amendment option.
There's a possibility.
Yeah.
There's always a possibility. Okay. So the 2040 plan was sent back from our alderman, the city planner planning commission for revisions. And I know, I'm assuming this is part of the process of this revision.
Yeah,
that's right.
We're doing it.
Okay. And then when you revise that, is we'll put the whole plan back out there. How will we know what has changed? Are those areas going to be highlighted? If we want to read the whole plan, how are we going to know what exactly was changed and what we're doing on that?
That's a good question.
But yeah, I guess we could, I don't know.
Save a lot of time.
Well,
one of the things we could
could
do
do like
is a summary
different
of which pages have changed, where like almost have in addition to a marked up plan, have a summary sheet with those pages.
Do you think that'd be confusing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or we could do like a note, or the same document, but a blue line.
Some
I don't
of
want to
what
keep
I've been
adding edits
thinking
and
is-
edits and edits.
And that's what's going to get
Right.
confusing because there's so many.
Edits, right.
things already.
I also think, and I'm anticipating, we have our planning commission chairman here, when the planning commission and board of mayor and aldermen meet jointly, which we're planning for September 19th for that to happen, I'm anticipating that we'll get some direction back as a staff of how much time or what method you want to, just like we've had to create additional time for this draft to be reviewed by the public, what are we going to do going forward if there's substantive, which I think there will be, revisions, how much more time do we want to allow for that document to be reviewed and commented on? So I'm hoping September 19th, just to summarize that back, on September 19th, I'm hoping to get that direction and we'll all know kind of what the next steps are. But I would imagine we'd have to allow some time, of course, for people to review this document, make sure
In
we
the
put it
next
at the
version.
library,
Yes.
and places like that, so
Yeah.
you can see it in hard copy, and get more feedback before they would even have it put on their agenda.
Right.
And I wanted to say one thing about the city revenue and the fiscal impact side of things. One thing that I have been paying attention to as your city administrator and overseeing the budget is this tremendous year-over-year growth that we continue to have in our sales tax. And one of the things that I know is, and these are general statements, but generally residential development does not pay for itself. Commercial and industrial development helps to subsidize the services that we provide residential areas. And so one of the things in this planning, and talking with consultants, I wanted to make sure that we continue to have viable areas for new businesses, for commercial entities. We always hear, Winston works in economic development for us, that Tullahoma doesn't have enough industrial spaces for businesses to go into, so we looked at that very closely. But I think that's why it's hard to say how will it impact your property taxes, because it's a lot of moving parts. It depends on what type of development we have. But if I look back, we've had tremendous success in seeing our North Jackson corridor especially generate surplus year after year that has allowed us for 9 years now to not need to increase the property tax rate. And then we just had a reappraisal, and we saw how much land has appreciated. Now, the city isn't allowed to benefit off of just that blanket appreciation of land. We can only bring in the same tax dollars. But still, it tells me that our property tax base is growing, and that's a good thing. And when we do have new businesses and new commercial, they're taxed at a higher rate, at that 40% instead of 25% value that residential is. So that's how we, long story short, that is how we hope that we can afford some of the infrastructure without having to increase it on our residents and on their property tax, is that we balance it with good economic development strategies that bring new jobs, that bring industry, that help small local businesses get started up, because a lot of times those small businesses, while they might not be a high number of jobs, they pay well and they add investment to the community. So anyway, that's some of it, but like I said before, I agree and understand the point that we need to probably see what it would cost and look at what would it cost to get some fiscal analysis in with the plan.
And talking about infrastructure, I keep hearing about the Kings Lane 2019 plan. I've heard Kings Lane 2019 several
Sure.
No,
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay.
Kings Lane to
So is it?
2019 plan.
Yeah.
Did a mobility study.
Is that a mobility study?
The mobility, that was a citywide mobility study. It included Kings Lane.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted
That's okay.
What was that? Okay. So, in talking about streets, which I know we talked a little about them earlier, as all these things occur in our city, there's a map, I believe it's, well, page 61 through 68, and it lists some of the main corridors going through town, and it looks like they're kind of rated as different streets and improvements that will be on that. So is there more information or a clearer, I mean, or can you go through like Jackson Street, Lincoln, Avoca, Raleigh Creek, those kind of things, what you have in mind for the development of those streets on there?
One of the things, and this might answer that, you tell me, chime in if I'm wrong, but this is the general plan, but we also have a more specific and detailed master transportation plan. And so the level of detail you might be looking for is probably in that.
Right.
Yeah.
That transportation plan goes into how much volume is on the given roads, how much increased volume each road can handle, how the roads are rated, and what potential roadway improvements are proposed.
Well, and I think to a question that
it's
you
on the
asked
city
earlier,
website.
that master transportation plan is where we've identified specific projects with a somewhat specific scope of work, like is it widening, is it adding bike lane, what is the project accomplishing, what's the start and end point, and it attempts to put it in a timeline over 15 years.
And that's in that.
And which projects are the top priority over the, so that might be, when you're talking about how does it get implemented, sometimes it's not in this document, it's in a complementary document.
Okay, and so that's on the city website.
Yeah,
We have
I'm
a parks.
confirming, but I'm 90% sure it's on the city website.
We have
It's the transportation plan.
We have a sidewalk and bikeway and greenway master plan. We have a transportation master plan, parks master plan. So all those if you think of this as like the overarching document, those fit underneath of it and go into a higher level of detail and timeline.
So there is a timeline on that. I like the idea about the trees.
Preservation.
The preservation of trees, and because I think it's really important not to just clear cut everything down. I see many times where they say we're going to have a greenway in a subdivision, they come in there and bulldoze everything out, and it's just a piece of concrete.
The only way it's in our existing code, I do know that we allow credit for what is existing. So if they keep what's there, if they have a landscaping requirement, let's say to put in new trees, we do allow them to count what they already have towards that requirement. So it's a little bit of an incentive not to tear down what you have, but I think I appreciate that. We'll put that down, that you want to support the recommendation they're making that we go further.
Well, and one thing that may help between existing subdivisions and new ones that come in, especially if they're going to be extra high-intensity areas, would be a separation of maybe having the developer put in berms or trees where you have that, people don't get as offended because they're used to being more private, and all of a sudden you have, a lot of people documenting.
And that's one of those things where if that comment and vision that we need to encourage more landscape buffering between either new developments or a higher density, that would get mentioned in this plan and then would have to be revised in the text of the subdivision regulations for us to enforce it. Yeah.
Another thing on the, y'all were talking about 300 to 400 units on townhomes, those apartments. I guess it's townhomes or apartments, those kind of places where people live. And if you, in the Anderson Farms, I believe there's 165 townhomes going into that one area. And we were talking about breaking that up, or that was the original suggestion for that plan. I know it's not.
See, I haven't seen
right.
it. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Did they propose a particular number of units?
Yeah, they were thinking, I can't remember, 100.
Yeah.
If she says it's 160, if they were 160, yeah, it was at that southeast, southwest corner of the
So
property.
we're
But again,
talking about breaking up, you know, not having such huge amounts in particular places.
Right.
And so I was just bringing that to your attention, that that was on the original plan.
And that's another thing that, so we had this economist do work for us, but a lot of, I don't know what that developer's done to evaluate whether there's a market to support that or not. And possibly they put that in a concept, but they would only, in a first phase or something, only build a very small number of those. And then watch and see how they sell. I don't know. I don't know what their idea is.
Yeah.
But I'd be surprised if somebody was willing to take that kind of risk. You agree, Dan?
Yeah.
To build 100 at one time.
It's not
Yeah.
feasible.
Just as a follow-up, if you go to the City of Tullahoma website, under the Planning Department page, there's a link for long-range planning. And that's got the existing comprehensive plan, the existing, by existing mean the 2012 plan. It's got the 2012 plan on there, the 2012 plan map. It's got the transportation plan on there. It has the ADA plan on there. It has a mobility plan. And the North Jackson Streetscape plan is on there as well.
This is something I've heard for years. I didn't go back and research it. I just thought about it this morning and wrote it down. I know on land at Bobo Creek feeds over into our natural state area and on into Normandy where our water comes from. And for years I've heard that there's always been a fight downstream with Columbia places needing water concerning that stream and Normandy Dam and that kind of thing. Was any studies done as far as the floodplain areas and the water going to that for water supply source at all? I mean, is there any concern or any talk that was done on that? I know at one time they were wanting to back up the lake more where it would cover up Machine Falls and that area down there, you know, would.
Right. I have recently heard some about that from Senator Bowling. I don't know if you know any more specific. I don't want to draw you into it. But all of that discussion, I think, is at TDEC at the state level, not at the city level.
Yeah.
But I'm obviously very interested in it.
Yeah.
And well, and at the,
Yeah.
In 2007, we had kind of a drought, and we had pumped our reservoir down quite far. So there were lots of concerns, and it's multi-state, federal level, Fish and Wildlife, endangered mussels. There's all kinds of issues going on, but you know, we've had a lot of rain since then. It hasn't been an issue, so it's kind of been off the radar.
But it sounded like to me that it is coming up again because of the mega site in Coffee County and discussions about needing to raise Normandy Dam. That's what Senator Bowling was sharing with me, that they've already got people on the environmental side talking about the snail darter and the other wildlife, and then maybe people on the other faction saying, no, the dam needs to be raised and we need more water. And so I think that this is an issue that we're going to be hearing more about and getting more involved.
Duck River, Randall Breaker, he's very concerned about the water levels and what's going on downstream of Maury County and the growth down there because they need more water too.
Right, and that was my concern, because that area is growing a whole lot, you know, and there, I think the talk I've always heard was that they were needing more water from our way. And then if we're building also, it just compounds the situation. So, there were several different places on where some places it says 15 units per acre and some places say 20 units per acre. Is there any clarification on how many that actually is?
In what context, ma'am?
I think it had to do with that
talking?
traditional neighborhood new, didn't it?
I think so.
And maybe there was a change between drafts where maybe it said 20 at one time and changed to 15 or vice versa.
Let me look at your plan. One moment, please. I believe that it was at 20 units per acre. 20 acre. But again, that number can be changed.
Yeah, I was just curious because I keep hearing different things to see where we were at on that. One last thing I'll ask about here is bring up is the aesthetics of where we live is important. People go to towns because they look nice, they feel good. They may not even know why they like a town, but it's because of the aesthetics of it. And I think that's one concern, at least I have that concern of when you do a lot of high density housing or bring in big box builders. They often build the same house over and over. Of course, crawl spaces are more aesthetically pleasing than a slab house is because it's lower to the ground. So Tullahoma's been very fortunate all these years to have builders that, local builders that would change up the plans and make everything look nice and pleasing. And I have passionate people that come to visit me out of town and they go to Tullahoma and they're like, wow, none of your houses look the same. And I think if we want to stay different from Murfreesboro and the other places that are growing here, we need to make sure that however we control the developers in it, that we make sure that we still look unique and we're not just like everybody else. Because then you're just coming into a town that looks the same. And I think that's really important to keep Tullahoma unique on it. And having, you know, smaller yards, smaller driveways, and a sea of houses that look the same, and cars parked in the driveways and all through the streets is not aesthetically pleasing to anyone. And I don't think, you know, while we may have to live there, and I will probably downsize at some point as I get older and have to live, you know, closer to my neighbors, which I don't mind at all. I still think the feel of a town is very important to it. I also want to throw in, I think your educational in a system in a town makes your town what it is. If your children are educated, it brings such a level of your town. And I think a lot of this, we don't want it to be fast-paced, overgrowth. We want to be able to maintain our school systems to a higher level, to educate our children and not have them feel overcrowded, the teachers stressed. And I think that's really important to look at and make sure that we have plans for a new school, we have the funding for new schools in all of this. That's all I have for my
Very good.
May I ask a follow-up on part of what somebody said? So we understand that things like a mixed-use development, PUD, whatever you want to call it, a mixed-use development is going to be fleshed out over time, built over time. It's my understanding that on the front end, you decide what goes where, And then what goes there has to be what you decided on the front end, regardless of when it's built. So if you section off a part of that and you say you have the ability to build 165 townhomes here, and then you wind up only building 80, the only thing that can be built there is townhomes. Is that not true?
So what I've observed, and this is really Mary's realm, but there is an amendment process for a plan development, and it looks the same as a rezoning process. And so obviously recessions happen, things change, and that will happen sometimes because they're talking about build out over such a long period of time.
Right.
They could come back and say, you approved me for this, I want to amend that and build and forget townhomes, I only
Now
want
we
to
wanna
build
do-
single family
right.
homes. But that would get considered by the planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen, just like a rezoning.
So it would be considered rezoning?
Yeah.
Because part of the current terminology in our current zoning basically says that when you start something like this, one of the rules in it, whatever it says, it has to be owned by one person. Then you have the plan. The plan is approved. After the plan is approved, that one person can then divide it into different pieces, but the pieces that are picked up by other people have to conform to the original plan. And that's where it goes through that whole process of, you know, all the green space has to continue to be green space. The green space can never be anything but green space. So if you take that logic then to the apartments, does it work the other way around? I wound up not building out all R1 type stuff, and now the economy's booming, and I want to put high density stuff in the R1 stuff. So can you amend it up and down? Can you amend it any way you want?
You could if you could get through both of those bodies to approve it.
So the possibility is there.
Yeah, so once something procedurally, once something is approved through a certain mechanism, any amendment has to be through that same mechanism. So if a plan development is required to be approved by the planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen, any amendment has to go through that same legal process of going back to the planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen.
So who's applying for the amendment? The developer? Does it go through the people in that area? So, you know, is it disproportionately based on the people who live there, or is it still just a citywide type of thing?
We kind of touched on this a little bit before you guys got here. It can be either. If a project just begins and you get a plan development approved and the developer has only started developing and wants to amend it, let me rephrase how I'm going to say this. A plan development amendment has to be applied for by all members, all property owners in that plan development.
Okay.
So I explained, I think, an hour or two ago, it's very difficult to amend a plan development once a lot of phases have been developed. Excuse me.
So I can see that.
I'm sorry.
Because those other owners
Yeah,
probably bought into a particular.
I had plan development in Tampa where I used to work, and like 100 people have to be on the application because everybody that bought into that subdivision are now legally vested in that subdivision. They're part owners of that entire development, so it's very difficult to do.
So it's disproportionate to the people.
Yeah, it's very difficult to amend a PD once the lots have started to be sold. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not coughing. I'm not sick, I'm a smoker.
I have another question, Mary. On the PUDs, or
hold on, let me go back to your page. Okay.
On the, just trying to think how I want to say this. So when you have PUD, you have I think that's all form where the city has like a guideline for PUDs.
Yeah, commercial ones, yeah, it's in the zoning code.
Okay, so when you have a developer coming in and you're doing a PUD, I guess that's the overall guiding document of it. And in this plan, y'all had a whole discussion about front-facing garages. And they have to be flush and stuff, that's where you're going to go with it.
Right.
So, what's to keep every developer just building that minimum thing they have to for money? Like, when I was talking about every subdivision looking the same. What's the incentive to have a be different? Are there different PUDs based, I mean, can the city do anything to keep where everything's just not the same, or?
Under a standard subdivision, no. Not how the current code reads. We don't have historic districts which can regulate architecture, nor do we have any design architectural districts. So under the current code, there's nothing to prevent a developer from going in and doing a subdivision and having all the houses match. However, an option for planned unit development is you can start saying you want certain architectural features within the residential product. You can also do, I've done plan developments where you say there's a certain level of repetition that you're allowed to do. You can't repeat the same housing, two-story housing type D more than 5 times within a given block. So you can, the plan unit development can regulate how often you're repeating the two-story with the garage in the front.
So again, that has to be addressed in our subdivision regulations if we want to address architectural types like that.
I think it would have to be in the zoning regulations to create a design. Yeah, it would be, let me think, hold on, let me think this through. It would come from the plan, and then it would be a design district that you would establish, saying, in this design district, and you would create the boundaries of that area within that design district. These are the design criteria for new construction.
Okay, but the way it's happened sort of organically in Tullahoma is because developers have sold off lots to different builders who have then built
over time.
a mix.
More local builders.
Yeah, not tract builders. That's not what we have. We have had.
And we certainly encourage, I do a lot of my job encouraging developers to do better projects and nicer looking facilities, but there's a difference between what legally I can encourage people to do and what I can require them to do.
So if you're getting a tract of over 500 units and you don't want them to be all repeat,
we would encourage them to be a planned unit development.
So you can only encourage.
No, we would.
I guess I'm trying to say, how can you, there's 3 orange places on the map. So if you have Hamilton Farms and the other 2, and they come in, they're all going to be guided by the same guidelines.
Right.
So how do you not have a sea of houses that look exactly the same?
This is how. Again, we got rid of the orange. So there's no more, I'm just, I know, but I'm trying to, so there's no more pre-designated orange areas. So if a project, and it's in the plan now, if a planned unit development, and we add, the planning commission added this, for the traditional neighborhood new, it says that this place type has a very different character than suburban neighborhood high density and is approved through the plan development process as outlined in the zoning ordinance. So that says that, it's in the plan. So anytime again, if the TNN stays in the plan at this point, if a developer came in and said, I want to buy this property and I want to invoke the TNN option, I would say the only way to get a plat approved is you have to do a plan development. And because then they're in that plan development process, we can ask for certain architectural standards. Okay.
I think that's a concern of a lot of people.
That's part of the reason why we discussed it at the steering committee and the planning commission, requiring everybody in this TNN option, if they wanted to take that option, making them go through that plan development process so the city would have more control over the final product. We can look at, do we want additional sidewalks because of the increased density? Do we want additional sidewalks? Do we want trails? Hey, we're going to possibly need based on the growth in this area, we need to look at another fire station. We need you to dedicate 3 acres for a fire station. We want you to have certain architectural standards. So that's part of the reason why we specifically put in the plan you have to go through that plan development. So the city would have more control over what occurred in those properties.
And typically around here, we do have crawl space houses, and on the slab houses, I mean, we have a lot of clay in our soil. We have a lot of water sitting. From my research several years ago, clay is not the best soil to build a slab house on.
No.
So in saying that, if we allow developers to build slab houses 10 years from now, what's that going to look like? You know, are there going to be issues and problems and those kind of things? I just have some concerns about our water drainage and that breaking up the concrete and making these homes that we want people to live in and enjoy being telehomes, and they're not so great after 10 years. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I can't address that one. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not going to formally speak on building code and housing code stuff.
Right, but who is?
The building official, the city building official, in our building department.
It seems like they're building a lot, you know, all around us, so I've just seen a lot of cracks in some houses. And it's not a good thing, and we don't want that.
Right, agreed. We only have about 10 minutes left. Are there any final comments, questions, concerns, input? And again, this isn't the last opportunity. Folks, you can certainly, we're meeting next Friday at 1 to 4 o'clock again, and then the following Saturday from 10 to 2. And then also, this isn't your only opportunity to submit comment forms to me. You can certainly email me or make an appointment to see me in the office. So we'll take any sort of suggestions for revisions and any mechanism that you see fit.
I would like to say, we haven't talked about it, but on Wilson Avenue, we're going through an undertaking of the widening of Wilson through the state eminent domain of that. And it's amazing the bodies that align together and things that get said. And the Facebook words that start going back. I don't think there's anybody in this group that I'm at least aware of that's involved with that. But a lot of mean things get said on Facebook. And I'd like to make certain that I'm really clear. The best thing I've seen in a long time is the city manager that we have and the planning folks. We have real professionals. They might not be doing exactly what we want them to do yet. I can assure you they're doing it very professional. And we were asked earlier about zoning. Well, if you look at Wilson Avenue and how it's evolved, there was a box manufacturing, a golf club manufacturing. Then around the turn of the century, a church moved in, Coca-Cola moved out, and it became boutique shops. So roles changed. And the problems that we heard with this young man right here, the same kinds of problems we have on zoning along something like Wilson Avenue. And these folks are very flexible wherever they can, but their hands are tied by what we sometimes do, and so they can't do it until they go to the planning commission and then to the board of Mayor Oliver. So we don't want to, just because I live on Wilson Avenue, I shouldn't be too concerned. If it's really that good about the city, these folks need to have the ability to change. And so the mob mentality and the words that are said, whether it's on Wilson or whether it's on Terra, I just would like to see it be more civil.
Well, I appreciate that, Dan. I can say the last couple months have been very, very difficult for me.
You're doing a great job. Thank you. We've been working on it a long time.
I appreciate you having me.
Appreciate the leadership.
I appreciate so many of you staying too for the whole meeting, and you know, people have different opinions about how this meeting should be structured or run, and you know, several people are very vocal that they wanted everyone to hear every question and answer that was asked. So I know that that takes a lot of time, and I appreciate your patience with that.
And to the gentleman we saw here, that's all. I mean, that happens a lot in the planning office, and the code is all in the building office. And these guys down there, they're great.
Things have changed. We've already modified a lot in the last 10 years.
I'm just saying,
we as a community.
They're always looking for solutions.
And the last thing I'll say is my son and daughter-in-law have recently moved back to Tullahoma. Where they lived before, and something that happened here is kind of interesting. They lived in a condo that on the 3rd floor, and on the 1st floor was Publix. And how wonderful that was.
Yeah.
When we went to visit them and we'd go downstairs and go to Publix, get food.
Get us some, yeah.
And, well, she's in commercial real estate, and a lot of the commercial that she gets from the customers, the first question is, where is Publix? How far is the driving radius for people getting to Publix? So a major piece of our growth has been because Publix is here. And when you see all around what's going on, and the earlier comment I made about Chick-fil-A, we'll do the same sort of thing. Hopefully they're not moving. We're not controlling it. But if they move over in Manchester, then they're going to be sharing some of that travel. And we'll get less sales tax. So we want to be competitive, and like I say, I think we've got as good a professionals as we could ever hope to have. And
But you might not lose Chick-fil-A, you might get 2 of them.
The last thing is when our granddaughter was up at the University of the South, they come down, a couple of guys come down and buy hundreds of sandwiches and take them up on top of the mountain and sell them. They're paying their way through college by just visiting. So Chick-fil-A that's their place to
They're
go.
like Chick-fil-A bootleggers.
You got it.
Open the back of my trunk. Hey, what do you got back there?
I want to just remind you, it's not your last chance to make comments. We take emails all the time, phone calls, walk-in visits, and we'll also be holding 2 more of these input meetings next Friday and Saturday. Thank you. Hey, Bill.